Recording in progress.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? We're going to get this meeting started. It is June 17th, 2024. It is 9:01 a.m., and this is a special meeting for budget hearings for the 2024-2025 budget. Can I get Supervisor Gonzalez, can you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Can I get an acknowledgement of posting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's a 5-0. Okay. We're going to move on to the actual budget hearing. And we're going to pass it over to Deputy CAO Ring.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Henny Ring with Administration, not Human Resources right now. Thank you so much. I'll start with the opening remarks and just go through some bullet points that we have for the recommended budget for 24-25. First and foremost, I want to thank all department heads and members of the public for joining us to discuss our financial plans for the upcoming year. But before I get started with my opening remarks, I first have to recognize the amazing employees of the County Administration Office and all the hard work that they went into getting the budget done this year. First, I want to comment that the past several weeks in this office have been unusual and very uncertain at times, but that didn't deter what needed to get done. Ramona Bon, thank you for your countless hours with this budget and all its nuances. Dulce Alonso, a big thank you to you for knowing what needed to get done, but most of all, how to get it done. And of course, your incredible work ethic. Gracie Rodriguez, thank you for all your hard work and support and being able to do what was needed to be done at a moment's notice. Also, a big shout out and thank you to the HR team, to Elvia Barocio and Rosie Hustos, who spent many hours on developing position control and setting up it to benefit for and streamline it for future budgets. And of course, a huge thank you to Cheyenne Torres, who spent many hours on the tedious back end of the budget and working on getting the finished product. Also, a huge thank you to the clerks of the boards, Vanessa Delgado and Aurelia Rodriguez, with their support and patience with postings. And a thank you, of course, a thank you to Lorena Moreno, Yesenia Gallegos, and Brittany Wright for keeping the office afloat. We couldn't have done it without their support. Again, a huge thank you, and I'm very proud to be part of their team. With that being said, let's get started with the recommended budget for 24-25. Our goal today is to ensure transparency, accountability, and efficiency in allocating resources to best serve our community and align with our strategic plan. I'd like to highlight a few accomplishments over the past fiscal year. The board's investment of over $500,000 to save our local hospital. We held the first legislative session with our legislators. We negotiated union contracts and implemented a 7% wage increase, and then also additional 6% in the second year across the board. We showed resiliency with our old courthouse fire building that caught fire, which impacted our elections, assessor, tax collector, and treasurer's offices. And we updated our county strategic plan to include SMART goals and objectives. I'd like to highlight some demographic insight of San Benito County. This past year, the population growth among the top 5 counties, growth is above 1% in California, according to the Department of Finance. We are standing at 1.1% increase in population growth, and this is due to housing gains. Currently, right now, if we go back and look at total housing for January 1st of 2023, San Benito had 21,576, and as of January 1st of 2024, that has increased to 21,892, which is a 1.5% increase. Also, City of Hollister had some increases that equal to 1.2% increase. San Juan Bautista, 0.3, and then just the balance of the county altogether was 2.1. So we have growth within housing. Age distribution. The age distribution within the county reveals interesting pattern. As of July 1st of 2023, there was a 55.3% proportion of residents in the demographic of 18 to 65 years. Persons over 65 account for 13.5% of San Benito County residents, which is an increase of 0.3%. Socioeconomic status. Analysis of socioeconomic indicators such as median household income of $111,544, which is about 25% higher of California's total, which is $91,591. The poverty rate in San Benito County is at 3.6%, which is about 1/3 of the rate in California, which is 12.2%. The 6% unemployment in 2023 shed light on economic landscape of San Benito County. Countywide recommended budget overview for 24 to 25. As you will see, there is an increase of approximately $34.7 million more in this from the budget that was recommended for 23-24. The reason for the increases and the changes is due to road improvement projects, and the increase in salary and benefits, and then as well as capital project costs. Also, the budget will cover the following schedule of authorized positions. There is a net increase into staffing of 2.2 full-time equivalent FTEs from prior year's schedule of authorized positions. We also had the Behavioral Health Department requested 8 positions to provide the mobile crisis community response services. Also, you'll see the administration took a closer look at some of the sheriff's office jail allocations and have recommended converting some CO positions into a non-safety support staff allocation. Also, the budget will cover the general fund overview recommended budget, an increase of $13.2 million from the prior year's recommended budget. The changes for the previous fiscal year include roads and CIP projects, ARPA projects, additionally the increase in salary and benefits. San Benito County will be reviewing the vacancy budgeting practices and will be exploring other ways for departments to help flexibly allocate or flexibly to recruit, leave flexibility to recruit, I should say, during times that may be difficult. Let's work together to ensure our budget reflects the needs and aspirations that we serve in, to serve the community. And without further ado, I will pass this budget hearing off to Ramona Bond, who is our county budget officer for San Benito County. I thank you.
Good morning, Ramon.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Before I get started with the presentation, I'd like to, first of all, echo everything Deputy CAO said about staff. It really did take everyone to do their part to get us here today. A few of the items I'm going to read right now are going to be in the details of the presentation. However, I would like to reduce the amount of distraction. So a lot of times when we see things on the slide and we could just read it ourselves, it will distract everyone from what I'm gonna do the reading before the slides. So we are here today to do the budget hearings based on the administrative office's recommended budget. As you may know, the administrative office is designated by the board to compile the budget requests, to review the budget requests, and prepare a recommended budget. At this time, the recommended budget has been submitted to the board by the administrative office, and we've done this before June 30th, which is our deadline based on government code. Now, upon receipt of the recommended budget, the board shall consider it and on or before June 30th of each year shall make any revisions, reductions, or additions. Any official or person whose budget requests have been revised shall be given the opportunity to be heard thereon before the board during or prior to the hearings. The goal of the budget hearing is for the board by formal action to approve the recommended budget, including the revisions it deems necessary for the purpose of having authority to spend until the budget is adopted. And I wanted to read one more section, a couple of more sections that I feel are very important for the budget hearings today. All proposals for revisions shall be submitted in writing to the clerk of the Board of Supervisors before the close of the public hearing. The hearing may be continued from day to day until concluded, but not to exceed a total of 14 calendar days. So basically what all that means is that effective today, if today's our first day, we have until exactly June 30th to conclude the budget hearings. I am not suggesting that we take the full 14 calendar days to conclude the budget hearings. I'm hoping that after you hear the presentation, you can see that we have a balanced budget. And aside from anything that has not already been planned for, if your board has any revisions that you want to make, then we would have to figure out how to implement those changes today so that we can move forward with what is being recommended. Oh, wait. One last thing. So at the hearing, the Board of Supervisors shall hear any official who wishes to be heard regarding the recommended budget for his or her budget unit. At the time of the hearing, the Board of Supervisors may call in the official or person in charge of any budget unit concerning any matter relating to his or her budget unit. The Board of Supervisors may also call in the official or person in charge of a budget unit if any member of the public files with the clerk of the board a written request to question any matter relating to that budget unit. Last piece. The auditor or a deputy designated by the auditor shall attend the public hearing on the recommended budget and shall furnish the board with any financial statements and data it requires. And I'm glad Joe Paul is here. All right. So a lot of the information I read was based on the government code you see in front of you on this first slide. We have Government Code 29062, 29063, and 29064. It's summarized in the slide. I just wanted to pick and choose specific items that are very important for us to hear. And the last section of the code, it says, the Board of Supervisors shall adopt by resolution the budget as finally determined no later than October 2nd of each year. So today, we're only working on reviewing and hearing the recommended budget. We still have time. If the board approves the recommended budget, then we have about 3 months roughly to finalize the adopted budget. So what is being approved today? The recommended budget is being approved as spending authority. This includes the personnel schedule, the fixed asset schedule, the capital projects schedule, the road improvement schedule, and operating budgets for all departments, CSAs, CFDs. These budgets are known as Schedule 9 and 15. Schedule 9 are the budgets for every department, essentially. And Schedule 15 is specifically for CSAs and CFDs, or what is known as non-enterprise funds. And here's an example of a Schedule 9 from the county budget guide. So eventually, this is what will be prepared and sent off to the state controller's office. So that's what it looks like when it's sent to the state, and this is what it looks like online for everybody in the public. Both Schedule 9 and 15, it looks very similar. It is our revenues and our expenses for any budget unit. The county-wide recommended budget, so all funds are approximately $338 million, and it represents an increase of about $34.7 million when compared to the 23-24 recommended budget. And as Henny indicated earlier, the changes are due to an increase in road improvement projects, salaries and benefits, and capital projects. And I have that increase for road improvement. That means we had in the current, in the expected 24-25 budget, we did have an increase in road improvement projects, which amounted to $16.9 million. And then the salaries and benefits, that $11.1 million is across all funds. And it's related to this 7% and 6% that were approved during negotiations. And then the capital projects, it did show an increase of $6.7 million. Now for the schedule of authorized positions, as it was indicated earlier, we have a net increase of 2.2, which shows that overall we didn't have, the recommended budget does not have an increase to staffing. We actually had a few departments that reduced their staffing levels just to keep things status quo as best as possible. Now, this slide does show that the Behavioral Health Department requested 7 positions, and I did a little reviewing, and it was actually 8 positions. So you'll see that, I believe, in the next slide. So as far as the schedule of authorized positions, in May, we had approximately 19 positions being requested from general fund departments. The administrative office is recommending that no new positions be added at this point in time for general fund departments. And once the auditor controller finalizes the current fiscal year financial transactions, so the reporting, we'll have a better understanding of where we're at as far as fund balance goes. So for the time being, the administrative office is recommending that the departments that were requesting new positions, they can work with HR and have discussions on ways to help with their operational needs, whatever they may be. This next slide shows all funds. So column on the right-hand side shows the recommended budget. The revenues are at 247 million countywide. This is general fund, non-general fund, capital project fund, all the funds in the county. And that $34.7 million increase is between the CAO recommended budget from 23-24 to the 24-25. So that difference from 303 million to 338 is where we see the increase. And as I said before, it's related to road improvement projects, salaries and benefits, and capital projects. And we will hear about road improvement projects and capital projects later today. This is a visual showing the expenditures by category, again, for all funds. A large portion of the expenditures are related to fixed assets. These include road assets. So it says fixed assets, but it's not just vehicles, equipment. It also includes work being done on roads. Salaries and benefits are about 27% of all expenditures. Services and supplies are 15% of all expenditures. Then we have other charges, which may include things like the cost allocation plan. We have transfers out, 45 million. We have 4.4 million in contingencies across all funds. And then we have other minor expenses. On the general fund side, we have about 122 million in total expenditures, and it represents an increase of $13.2 million. Some of the changes from the prior fiscal year are related to roads, CIP projects, the ARPA projects, and the increases in salaries and benefits. For the general fund, the increases to salaries and benefits are about 16%, and it's related to cost of living adjustments as well as increases to healthcare. That was $6 million in salaries and benefits, and then we have a $5 million increase in ARPA projects. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And we do have so at this point, the administrative office will continue the vacancy budgeting practice to allow departments the flexibility to recruit. We did meet internally, and in order to balance the budget, we selected 3 positions from different departments that were vacant positions, and we unfunded those positions, again, to balance the budget. So we had to reduce expenses in a couple of areas. And for the positions, let's see. So I think in May, the board was able to see a list of potentially vacant positions at the May meeting. The general fund had about a $6 million deficit, and we came to the board and listed all the potentially vacant positions at the time, and we mentioned that if the county were to move in the direction of unfunding vacant positions, then we would be able to have a balanced general fund budget. So after going back and reviewing a lot of the details in the budget, we were able to reduce that $6 million deficit down to zero. So we do not have a deficit right now. And we were able to do that without having to unfund all the vacant positions. So we only unfunded 3 vacant positions. Those were one position out of the Ag Commissioner's office, one from the Assessor's office, and one position from planning. So we had a code enforcement officer was unfunded, a supervising appraiser was unfunded, and an account clerk was unfunded. The rest, that was about $360,000 worth of reduction. The other items that helped us balance the budget for the general fund were all the department requests. So all those new, I'm going to go back a couple of slides. So on the general fund side, you see 17 positions being requested. That added up to $2.6 million because the administrative office is recommending that we do not move forward with those 17 positions. It allowed us to reduce the general fund budget by $2.6 million. Another item that we had on the revenue side were related to taxes. I think we had the Auditor Controller's Office reviewed the GAN limit, and they noticed that one of the estimates for a tax item was $8 million. And they pointed out that in the current fiscal year, we've received $10 million. So I increased the revenues there by $2 million. So it helped offset that deficit. I'm going to continue with the slides. I'm going to try to get through them. And then if there are any questions, I could always go back and go over that. So this slide is the general fund expenditures by department. And the picture shows every department, and it shows the total budget for the administrative office, the sheriff department, behavioral health, probation, community development, auditor controller, public works, and health and human services. This is showing the budget for that all funds. It's $300 million. And it's just a visual to see how the funds are allocated, how the resources are allocated by department. So the recommended budget has been made available online, and I'm not going to go on there, but it takes us to stories. So what do we have on consent agenda item? On consent agenda item, you know it's a long list, and it includes budget units that, aside from normal cost of increases, don't really have any large significant increases other than cost of living adjustments, service contracts, renewals, extensions, PERS, and OPEB costs. On regular agenda item, we have budget units with large significant changes or relevant changes, sometimes omitted items, supplemental adjustments, and updates on costs or perhaps missing information. With that, if there are any questions on the presentation before we continue with approving consent agenda items or...
Okay, I think we have to open it up to public comment right now, and then we'll bring it back to the board for the discussion.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card on Zoom. Please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
And then I'm assuming I have to ask if the clerk of the board has received any written requests from departments on consent to present or discuss for that government code that was mentioned.
I have not received anything.
Okay. So bring it back to the board. Who would like to go first? Anybody?
I can go first.
Supervisor Kozmicki.
Thank you. Good morning, Ramon and everybody. Hope everyone had a nice weekend. So vacancy rate being updated, just wondering, is there an updated vacancy rate based on if we make the changes that are being recommended?
Microphone, please.
Just for future, yeah, I know we talked about addressing it, but.
So what we had determined was there are still positions that are funded, they're just being held. We took 3 basically of the ones that Ramon talked about. We're holding those because that helped us get us to the numbers better.
Right.
Some of those allocations that were previously in there are still in the schedule, but they're just not funded right now.
Okay.
So
But the rate itself, I think, was it like 27 or something before? I thought?
I believe that was the number. I'd have to go back.
And you, maybe just for later,
Yeah.
I'm not stuck on that for the budget. I'm just wanting just for future consideration. And as we work through that, deciding which positions that are, you're going to keep and which ones we don't at some point if they're on the books for too long. And then also if we could get like an updated, I know so there was just the 3 off of the list, at some point an updated list of all the positions. I guess we just subtract the 3, that the updated position of vacancies that we're leaving in the budget, just to take a look at those at some point. I don't necessarily need that today, because it doesn't necessarily play into, hopefully doesn't play into whether we can balance the budget, but I would like to see that at some point, just an update. I think we should always have that sort of updated as we take positions out, add positions. And then just broadly speaking, as we kind of parse through this, I'll just say what I say every year is that, if we can save money in certain places, I prefer that we do that. We always have to decide what priorities are. If there's things that aren't necessarily essential, I know we're going to get into the capital budget later, but I'd always like to set money aside if it's not essential for the hundreds of $millions in road repairs that we still have. It's great that we're doing what we're doing. I think it says a lot about this board and the county that we're starting to address the roads, but we're just starting to address the roads, and we have a long way to go. And then I did, as I sort of dove into the budget this year, I did, especially with the way how tight things are, and we're going to be getting requests for additional things here, I'm sure today. The services and supplies budgets in particular, I would like to get a report at some point as well on travel, training, more thoroughly for all departments. I did ask for the supervisors in particular, but travel, training, lodging, meals, all those things that are sort of incorporated into travel budgets in light of how tight things are, in light of the fact that we are doing these historic pay raises and medical benefit increases. That I really would like to see that further, because in the past we also have had policies, for instance, to have all out-of-state travel items come back to the board for consideration in a public forum. I'd like to see that considered at some point. I know that's not on the plate today. It's a policy item, but I would like to see that come back, especially in light of some of the numbers that I saw, that I'd like to just get a better handle on the essentiality of some of this travel and training. I know there's training is important, especially certain departments it's required, basically. I get that. So I'm not harping on it in general. I just would like to have more information than just a broad number for each department, which is what I basically dove through last night as I stayed up till 1 a.m. looking at stuff. So I apologize if I'm tired here. And then, so that, I just want to point that out, and I will probably pull a few of the items just to ask a little further, not to be interrogating, but just to really get the conversation started on some of those items. And then I also was curious about illegal dumping. We've talked about doing more with illegal dumping. I don't know if Selena's here. She can at some point be asked about that. I know she's involved with that as well as code enforcement. Just making sure that we have funding set aside for some of these initiatives that I think we've talked about doing, along with the homeless encampment cleanup. I don't necessarily know if there was anything specific to that in the budget. So these are some of the things that I would like to see, maybe if we have some areas where we might be able to cut today or in the next 14 days, that we consider I would like clarity on that, on do we have some money for homeless encampment cleanup? I don't want to necessarily have to go back and get a 4/5 vote when we're next year, or whenever we do it, when we're presumably going to do this. I think we're all, most of us are in agreement about it. So that's one I was just hoping to get clarity on. And then the $400,000 match for, I guess that's going to be within a specific, the match for grants. I think we need money for grant matching. At some point, if I get any historical data on how much we've actually, I'd like to see us request that and more. Actually, I think it would be great to get the more the merrier, but maybe some information at some point on that, not necessarily for today. And then I know we're going to get to capital projects, but I just want to make sure that, because we have a couple different capital items. There's one in the intro, and then at the end, I just want to make sure I talked to Steve briefly about just getting more clarity on what those priority projects are that are being recommended. Just make sure that we're not under the impression here today that we're necessarily approving everything that was listed in the capital projects list, because that was a lot, and some of it can frankly be put off very easily. And I just want to make sure there's clarity on that, so there's understanding that that's at least a debate to be had. And then, let's see here, and I think it was $1 million that maybe Steve mentioned to me on Friday when I called him. And then as far as the reserve policy goes, I know we talked about doing the gradual buildup. I'm just wondering if we can get clarity again on where we're at, what year it was. There were 4 years of a buildup. I think we're maybe in the second year or the third year. Does anybody have clarity on that, where we're setting aside a certain amount each year because we were doing this major road improvement plan? Sorry, go ahead, Ramon.
So as far as the reserve goes, we do have a slide on it. I think it's after the regular agenda items.
Okay. Yeah.
I could address it now, or?
No, that's fine. I was, when we get to it, I apologize.
Okay.
I'm getting ahead on some of this stuff. So, because I just wanted clarity where we're at in the 4 years. That's all, when you get to that point. And that's, as far as just this opening stuff goes, that's essentially all I had.
So is there anything specific on consent, Supervisor?
Oh, yeah.
Mickey, that you want to?
Oh, poll? Or?
Because that's the topic right now is consent. So.
Oh, I
is
thought
there
we were
any-
talking about the opening, and I didn't know we were pulling
Yeah.
items yet.
Did we are on consent right now, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay,
So
because
if
that
you have
wasn't clear to
something
me.
on
I know when I
consent-
looked at the agenda, it was
Yep.
basically his opening, and then we were doing
Yep,
consent.
he went
Those are
in-
my comments for the opening.
Yeah, he went into opening and then consent. So if you want anything
Yes,
for
I
consent.
do, yeah. So consent, and I just want to make sure I get the numbers, because there's two different numbers attached to some of these, like administration. I certainly want to pull county administrative office. So would that be the 11 number? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, so administration, auditor was 29.
Yep.
Clerk recorder elections 33 to 35. Assessor, let's see, assessor, the number is 36. And treasurer, tax collector, public administrator is, sorry, whatever number that is. 30 to 32. 30 to 32 for treasurer, tax
Yep.
collector. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I just want to, let me just double check, because we can't go back here. No, I think that's it for consent.
Okay, so I have 11, 29, 30 through 36 is what I'm showing. Okay, so who would like to go next? Anybody? Supervisor Sotelo? No? Supervisor Zanger?
Just a question, kind of a format-related question, Ramon. Are we going to discuss at what point those 3 positions that we talked about, the unfunding the vacancies, how those were chosen versus other positions? Are we going to get into that in regular, or? You want to discuss that now?
We can discuss it now.
That would be great.
Yeah, okay, yeah, well then I just, basically, yeah, why'd we choose those three of all the vacancies?
So those three were one of the longest standing open vacant positions. We went through and looked at them, and that way, because that was one thing that the board had brought up previously. And so some of them were open for 1,400 plus days. So if that's what we looked at first. And so those are the ones we held. And based on those dollar amounts, they got us closer to balancing the budget. So we pulled those three.
Okay, specifically, do you know how long the second code enforcement officer position was open for?
I believe that was in the 865 around there. So it was not quite 1,400, but it was around 865 days.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Can I follow up on that, Madam Chair?
Sure, go right ahead.
So what can we do, because code enforcement clearly is a priority of this board?
Yeah.
So they have one other allocation that is, it could be building inspector or code enforcement. It could flexibly allocated. That one we didn't freeze. So they still are able to hire one. It's still funded.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
If I may address
Please,
that
go right
issue.
ahead.
So I accidentally glossed over one of the slides. I focused on general fund, however, the slide with the positions, we also had the county integrated waste management team. They came to the board in May and requested a position for a code enforcement officer, and that one is being recommended for that position to be approved. And so on the planning side of things, that's a general fund position, the one we decided to unfund. However, the integrated waste management team is working with planning, and they did request a position for a code enforcement officer. So that one is being recommended as an approved position. And so they will be able to do that work in the next fiscal year.
Great. Yeah, but that makes sense. I appreciate that. Yeah, because that's what I was kind of wondering about, because I remember they came and asked for that, and so it was a little confusing, but thank you.
No, and I appreciate the clarification, because you guys went where my question was, because code enforcement, if we're cutting it, but so we have one in planning that is still put general fund available, and then now this one in integrated waste. Okay.
Correct. The general fund is being.
Just making sure I'm following, right. Supervisor Gonzalez.
I actually wanted to look at number 11 as well, so thank you for pulling that, Supervisor Kazamiki. I think that was the only one. But Ramon, can you go back to your...
Is your mic on?
Yes, it's on.
Okay, just making
Can you go back to your chart that has the expenditures by department? Can we look at that one? That one, yes. Okay, so looking at it, and I know this board has been committed to, working on roads. They've been far neglected over the decades. But I'm just kind of concerned about the large figure of that pie chart of how much is going to roads. But we're focusing already on the CAO's office, so that's good. But that's an image that we need the community to really see where the funds are going, where they're allocated, because that's a great chart, that's a great tool. So when we're looking at the tax revenue that's coming in, that's where our dollars are being spent. And so thank you for that. But as I said, just item number 11 is the one that I wanted to discuss. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, and I totally agree, because I liked on that slide how you broke out administration office to understand all of the departments that are funded under that. The public works one, I think it would be very helpful. So I really support being able to see more of that transparency for the public, so they can see how much is being allocated to roads. I think that would be very beneficial. And with that, because of the ones that Supervisor Kosmicki called or pulled, I have none to pull. So with that, are we going to start consent now before we move forward? Is that how you want to do this? I just want to make sure I'm following the order of things. So we're going to go with number 11, which is county council, or sorry, CAO.
You want me to ask?
You go right ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
You pulled it. You go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll get right to it. So we, essentially we need to add in an assistant CAO position to the budget late in the game here. I saw 327,000, I think, for that. So that's just one request off the bat, just to get that in and to potentially look at starting that position at a higher step as well. So I don't know what sort of calculations need to be done on that, but I would like to have formal consideration for that. And obviously that would mean that we need to look at some areas. I did ask for Ramon to be prepared for some tweaks if we need to. So I'm hoping we can have that discussion as far as what further changes we can have on top of the recommendations that were given. And then I also would like to have consideration to hire a search firm for that as well. We haven't gotten into dollar amounts for that, but I know Henny has some experience with, we worked together on the COG search, for instance, what that dollar amount might be here as we work through this budget and try to get it approved. So that's in the range of 350, 375,000 if you do a search firm. And then I had, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not here to like interrogate. I just was hopefully to get more clarity on, and again, maybe I don't want to beat the drum too much, but just more clarity on, I know training is necessary, but I think especially considering how tight things are and that everybody, understandably wants and needs more. We have all these capital projects that we're needing to put off again, which I agree with. Hopefully there's consensus on that because of where we're at on the operational side and the needs that we have in the roads and everything. So I just would like to take a closer look at the travel and training budgets for all the departments. And under this particular category, we had the CAO's off, CAO for $32,000 jumped out. The clerk of the board had $10,000. I know there's required training, but I just hope to get more information on that because there's only 2 people in that division. IT had 11,000. There's just a few employees there. And HR, and this, I know this can be explained, but there was a number that jumps out of $120,000 for training within the HR budget, if Henny can address
And
that
could be countywide. That training's spread out through because we have mandated certain things that we have to have done, such as like AB 1825, which is sexual harassment training.
Okay.
And so that's all county employees. So some of that may be incorporated into the.
So that would be like something for every employee that we get the notices on every.
Yeah. And then we have additional workplace violence training that's now being mandated as well. So there's some
Understandable. Yeah. And I knew it would be explainable. I just would like maybe some more information on that. Just for clarity's sake, and I think for the public's sake, because that's, I always look for anomalies and numbers that jump out. And then I know the law enforcement, I get it. There's a lot of required training in law enforcement, but just some more clarity on probation and sheriff's office in particular, just to make sure that we get sort of some actual reporting of it, just instead of just the broad numbers. Again, I know law enforcement, you got to do training, but probation was in the, from what I could tell, $107,000. And just sheriff's was, I guess sheriff's later, so I'll address that when that comes up. It's similar, but I just want to get a little more information on that. And then the meals that are included, I know we all got to eat when we go and travel, but it all kind of adds up is my point. You can have tens of $1,000s in meals alone for some of these departments, and I just want to get a better handle on the essentiality of those. And so that was it for administration. The main point was adding this assistant CEO position and recommending a search firm for that, but also even if it's offline, I'm not expecting everyone to have their travel and training budgets here today. I'm just trying to make a point that I'm hoping we can look at that as time goes here to see if we can tighten the belt a little bit on that particular area, because it adds up when you go through all the departments. And I'm going to get to the Board of Supervisors as well. And when you go through all of them, it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and some of it's required, some of it's beneficial, but I just want to make sure I can get some more information on that at some point.
Okay, so your overall request is more of a breakdown countywide, all departments.
More detail,
on-
yeah, 'cause-
On
yeah.
travel and meals and that.
training.
So I think instead of doing each one.
Right.
I think
And I
we've
can
given.
skip over a couple of these things
direction.
I pulled. I'm not,
Okay,
point taken, hopefully, that I don't want to throw
Dive
anybody under
into
the
it
bus
more.
or anything, but yeah, just, and like I said, I know law enforcement's probably the one especially that's going to be like, come on, you got to do certain stuff, but that's all. Yeah, more
Okay.
detail.
Any Supervisor Gonzalez, I know you also said you were,
No, I mean, Supervisor Kozmicki hit a lot of the high points, but I just have always felt that that budget has always been top-heavy. And so looking at it in terms of analyzing all the expenses and something, that might answer my questions. So I don't have a particular question per se.
okay,
Thank you.
nope. Supervisor Zanger? Nope. Okay, so then we're going to move on to, if there's nothing else, you guys are good?
No, but just the recommendation on the addition of the, I don't know what the dollar amount would be. It would be 327, and I threw out the search firm.
And I'm supportive of that. Is there any comment on that request from Supervisor Kozmicki? Nope. Seeing none? Okay, if you could look into what that would be and how we might be able to fund that, if we can, and if not, then we'll bring it back to the board. So now we're.
Do we vote on these today, or are we
I
doing
don't
that
think
later?
we have to vote on these. These are just recommendations and comments coming back. Is that correct, Council? We don't have to vote on each one of these when we're only the ones that we're adopting and not changing. So this one, we're giving feedback, so we're not voting on it right now. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yeah.
but then if we're doing an overall budget, we have to know if we add $375,000 or whatever the number might be here, then, me as somebody that wants to balance the budget, we're going to have to offset that.
Gotcha.
somewhere.
Yep.
So perhaps we're just not approving the budget today if we still need more information on this and maybe some other items that come up.
I'm going to defer to not just council, but also to Deputy CAO, because you do need to be able to look at these other departments if we're adding stuff. And I don't want to lock anything in that will restrict you from looking at all options.
Ask for clarification, are we looking at 327 or 375? Because those are two figures that you threw out.
327 was listed, but I also threw out a search firm, so I don't have an exact dollar
Yeah,
amount.
and I would
No, it's
say
in the-
anywhere between 25 to 35,000 for a search firm.
Okay.
So 360-ish.
Gotcha.
Thank
Do we
you.
need to vote on this, or is this just, we're giving feedback to the staff for bringing it back to us?
Yeah, that's what it appears like, because you are changing the number, so.
Okay, so we're not voting on this, we're just giving staff feedback, and then we'll have a future meeting.
Correct.
Okay, just making sure I'm doing this right. Okay, so we're moving on to item number 29, which is the auditor, controller, supervisor.
Yeah, just a couple
Kozmicki.
quick questions. Joe Paul, sorry. Thanks, Joe Paul.
Sure.
So under the service and supplies, I saw other consultants for $40,000. It's just, I know there's an explanation, I'm sure, but just it's gone up quite a bit. I guess it was 11,000, 22, 23. Could you just explain that a little further, please? And sorry, I'm catching you off guard. I did this with Maury Povich on in the background last night, so.
I believe this is related to the county's actuary, OPEB actuary. This is where we budgeted the valuation to be performed for this year. I mentioned at a previous meeting to the board that this is the year that we are having the valuation done, the 2-year evaluation. So that's where that's
Okay,
budget.
great. And then computer hardware, $40,000, just because it's a larger amount than other departments. Do you know, is there like an overhaul going on, or?
Yeah, we have equipment that we want to replace because it's, it's reached its useful life. And so associated with our desktops. And we also are looking at expanding the number of equipment that we have associated with our training program that we are planning on rolling out for the departments, where we're going to actually have invite new hires from departments to come into the office to get specialized training, hopefully before they roll into the departments, so that we could improve efficiencies, with the following of county policies.
I'm wondering on the, I'm going to be a little nitpicky, I'm going to annoy some people today, but I'm wondering on, basically you said new computers essentially. I'm wondering if IT can chime in on, just because the number in auditor's office is an anomaly compared with other departments as far as new computer hardware. So I just want to make sure that it's all necessary, that I know everybody wants a new computer, but do we need necessarily new computers in that dollar amount? Because it's such a big amount. I don't know what percentage is new computers versus the training software. I guess it's not software, the training.
This is hardware,
program.
yeah.
Yeah.
So can I just chime in? Are you trying to create a training lab where you bring in employees and have multiple computers and they're being trained on the software programs as new employees so that they can follow the either payroll, purchasing, procurement, whatever the training may need?
That's exactly what we're doing. Is somewhat of an accounting fiscal academy that we are just now in the development of that kind of guidelines that we're going to be teaching new hires. For example, how to work the ERP system. What are the county purchasing policies? What is the county's travel policies? What are those types of things that they need to know as not only as employees, but as the fiscal people associated in the departments? What the county's policies are, especially as they relate to payroll.
I get that part. So I'm wondering if we can get maybe into the next, presumably we're looking at a second budget hearing here, some more information, just parsing
Sure,
out the new computers versus, because I get the training part. I just want to look harder at the new computers and get IT's evaluation of that.
And I'd just like to add to that it can be a multi-use. If we're going to be investing in hardware for training for countywide employees, especially new hires, that it's something that's collaborated with what HR may need or what other departments that deal with countywide items. Just a thought, just so it's not just for one thing. Instead of investing in those, it could be multiple.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Yes, go right ahead.
Just for clarification, so new hires, because some of those policies are already covered through new employee orientation, but you're talking about direct training of how those policies are applied, and
That's correct.
Okay.
And the software programs
Yeah, and the software
that they
programs.
use.
The ERP does definitely make sense because it's a new program and some of the classifications have to use it a little bit more in depth than others. So, but yeah, just for clarification, is we cover, like I said, new employee orientation covers policy, but I think this is a practical use of.
So if you could kind of come back with a little bit more detail on this, I think that's what we're asking for here.
Just
I like where you're going with it,
On the
personally.
hardware, what exactly the hardware budget, what composes of that amount? That's what you.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
okay.
Appreciate that.
I can do that.
And then also the office furniture for $25,000, under $5,000 category. So it just jumped out. That's a lot of money for office furniture.
Yeah, that's associated with that change in bringing in bringing in more people from the departments, we're going to need to situate them in a way that, put them in a office desk, provide them everything that they would have in their departments. We need to have it here.
Is there a lot of stations then? Because again, I'm wondering if there's a need to maybe, it's a broad number. So
honestly, we're still in development, so we put an amount in there that we think that, hey, if we're going to really, try to expand, it's not only for training for brand new employees, it's for training for existing employees as well. To go over some of the things that are, problem areas, those kinds of things that we want to kind of nip them in the bud, especially as it relates to grants and the reporting of grants. We are, it's one of the issues that still remains definitely comments in our ACFR from an external auditor is that we need to shore up the knowledge and abilities of in the departments as associated with the fiscal and accounting aspect.
Great. No, and I just was hoping to, maybe we can take a closer look, Ramon or whatnot, just the amount of furniture that's needed. I just want to, because we're going to be probably nitpicking over similar dollar amounts when we get to the capital items. So that's why it jumped out to me. It just happened to fit into a different category. But if we could just get a little more on the need there, just in light of our budget situation this year. And then the last one was just the travel, lodging, transportation. What I added up was about $40,000. Just wondering which of that proportion is more on the required side.
Training is a very large part of what I emphasize in the department. I want all my staff well educated in the well trained. Everything associated with what we're charged with doing, which is following the GASB statements, and there's over 100 of them now. So there isn't a week that goes by that there isn't someone taking a training from the GFOA or from the AGA and some of the other associations that provide training on specific subjects.
Okay, yeah, and I guess when we get that, and even those next, on these next, I'll be honest, with the next three with clerk, assessor, treasurer, I had other questions for Joe Paul, so I figured I'd ask it, but those other three, honestly, I was just going to ask similar questions, and I think about the travel and training budgets, and if I can get a more thorough report, then we don't have to waste everyone's time bringing those department heads up, and I can just talk to them individually, or maybe
and then we can have a better summary breakdown presented to us.
I don't know how this thing works. That's all. But I think that's it for Joe Paul. But as long as we get a report on, a more thorough report on travel training for everyone else, I don't necessarily need to have the clerk, recorder, assessor, or treasurer.
Okay.
So it would be on all the departments that were selected for 11, 29, and then 33 through 36?
Well, I think were you saying you wanted it on all departments for travel?
On all, I would like a more thorough breakdown of what's being spent, and maybe an analysis at some point, if necessary, of just necessity levels of those. Like I said, I'm not under any assumptions. I just want more information.
Oh, okay.
I mean, in tighter times, we've had, as you're aware of, Joe Paul, the county has gone to policies where I'm preparing for a potentiality of what could happen with the economy and all this. I just want to have the conversation started about some of these low-hanging fruit areas that we could potentially at some point look at.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, so with regards to your department concerns in your budget, I see that you have insufficient staffing to provide adequate support in addition to the training. And so I'm very supportive of whatever training that you and your staff require. I mean, the training is essential in order to be able to do the job efficiently, and we can't cut your budget to save dollars where it's going to make you unable to do your job. And so I very much support the training, contrary to what Supervisor Kosmicki believes or feels.
I just want information.
I know, but I'm just saying I'm a firm advocate for training that's essential to do any job, any department. But my question to you is in terms of your concerns. You have 13 FTEs. So staffing, what is it that you'd be asking for as if budgeting wasn't an issue? Because I have concerns about what your stated concerns are on the web page there.
Well, if you notice, we had 13 in prior years. That included the IT person, Mike Parsons. He's situated with the clerk recorder's office. Basically, he provided support for the ERP system for really countywide. And he's no longer going to be providing that support, and because he's no longer associated in the auditor's office. In fact, today I was questioned by a member of the IT staff. Hey, what are we going to do to fill that gap? And so that's still an unknown. We're going to be having discussions probably later this week on that very subject.
You're not asking anything from us then in terms of trying to resolve that for you at this point?
Well, it's pretty clear that we cannot hire an IT staff member for the auditor's office. That was, pretty much we were told that we could not do that. So that's not a request that we're making at this time. However, after we have our conversations with IT, I'm hopeful that they'll be able to provide that to fill that gap. But to be honest with you, the tone of the question is that they really can't. So
what will your department do then without anyone to do that, those duties, those responsibilities?
Well, one is that we've already assigned a lot of the kind of the application, specific application, the ERP system, security, those types of things that Mike used to perform. A new employee comes in, they have to be assigned a certain profile and securities to be able to have access to be able to get their work done, right? Well, we did transfer that to one of our auditor accountants to perform that work. That person is in the process of getting trained in that aspect. Now, we have our Tyler Technologies has requested that we have a it's called an identity program, so that it's for security to be able to identify users in the ERP system, and that those users are also part of the network. And at this time, we're unable to provide Tyler Technologies with that program because it hasn't been purchased or selected, and it would normally have been done by by Mike Parsons, but it's now we've shifted that well, I'd like to shift that burden over to IT to make that selection, purchase, and installation of that software, so that we can be compliant with Tyler Technologies, their requirements as associated with accessing cloud computing.
So can I chime in here? Because you're hitting a spot that was on my radar too. So is there services from Tyler to manage when new accounts need to be formed? Is there any outside services for this type of work, or is this only in-house staff that's eligible for doing this? And the reason I bring that up is if we're going to be looking at, because I do know what role you're talking about, and there consequences for splitting departments, because that does cause an issue. You have a very big gap right there, and I know how much work the staff member put into these in supporting the ERP system. And the ERP system has to be supported regularly or it will not be successful. At the same time, we're looking at, we have a procurement software, which we have not fully implemented at this time, and that is going to be a topic that I'm going to be bringing up, which is dealing with procurement. And could we tie procurement, and if this has to be an in-house position with a technical aspect to it, of making sure that new employees are trained, not just trained, but in the system, have the right access, have the right security, go through the training of the auditor's office, but also the procurement. I'm kind of trying to tie those together, if you kind of get my drift. I'm being kind of vague there because I don't know what it could exactly look like, but it could be someone with a technical aspect that could help support the auditor's office.
Are you specifically talking about somebody in the IT department that would be assigned to support?
No,
or?
typically I'd like us to look at where procurement normally lands. Right now we have it in county council, but that's because we're trying to get through the contract and the RFP legality side. But where does it need to be housed, and what do positions like that look like? That's something that I had planned to bring forward.
And that's something HR can do research on and look at, like, other counties where their procurement lives, previous county.
And then maybe tying in what the ERP support needs are. That's my thought.
Okay.
Okay? Anything to add, you guys?
No, thank you.
Currently, there's no position that available for that. But of course, could we use a extra pair of hands? Of course, especially as it relates to, that kind of technical skills.
Well, and what I like about the procurement, whatever this position may become or could be, or how it could evolve, is how it ties with the auditor's office, how it ties with procurement, but also how it connects with the training aspect of employees understanding how the system works, so that we have all the checks and balances in place. That's where I'm going with this.
And in addition, I think what IT's concern is that they're going to have access to the county network, and so that's someone who really has specific expertise.
Right. Just throwing it out there since we were on.
We'll make note of it.
Okay,
Sure.
great. All good? All good? Anything to add? Thank you, Joe Paul.
All right, thank you.
I think that covers everything. And then we're not going to go on to.
I'm okay unless anyone else had other issues, just questions with those, as long as I get more information on
travel and training. Okay. Okay, with that, then that moves us to, because we're not going to approve this at this time, to give the administration time and budget time to be able to look at all areas of where savings could come in for the request that was made. So with that, that brings us, if I'm correct, it's going to bring us to regular agenda. Correct? Okay. Who's kicking it off here?
That will be Ramon.
Okay, Ramon. How about this? Sorry. You guys mind if we take a 5-minute? Is that okay? I need to take 5 minutes. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to start regular agenda. So Ramon, you have 5.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're coming back from recess, and we have one, would you call it a budget unit? 1287, that's the climate action plan
Yes, that's correct.
that was not listed on the agenda. So we will need to do an urgency add, and I was going to ask if you'd like to come up and just explain a little bit, what is this? This was added and wasn't part of last year's budget. This was added this year.
It was. Hi.
Hi,
good
Ariel. How are you?
morning. I'm doing great. I'm so glad to be here. So essentially what it is that we added a specialty item for the grants we were receiving on sustainability. So our climate action plan, that was a $280,000. It made it easier. It had originally been under integrated waste, but it wasn't appropriate, per the auditor, it wasn't the appropriate way to manage that grant fund. And we are applying for other grants as well, so it just created its own item. And we did that mid-year, but it looks like it just was an oversight task.
So I just want to make sure it's part of the budget. It's not like we're out $280,000. It's just it wasn't included in the agenda. I just want to make that clear.
Correct.
Okay. I just don't want anybody to panic that we went in the whole $280,000 while we were on break. Okay, just making sure. Okay, so with that, we're going to come back to regular agenda, and we're starting with item number 1, which is Board of Supervisors.
So for the Board of Supervisors, we have the budget revenues, expenses. In this case, there are no revenues for this budget unit. And the salary and benefit costs, the increase between fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25 was 6%, and that's related to the cost of living adjustments related to negotiations. Overall expenses increased by 6%, which is very minimal. You can see that the actuals for fiscal year 23, all expenses were 1.2 million. That's the second column, second row. And the recommended budget for 24-25 is 1.2 million. It's actually a little lower than fiscal year 23. The only item that increased a little bit are in other charges. The cost allocation plan, I believe, is $350,000. Yeah, that it actually went down from the actuals. If we compare 22-23 actuals, other charges, it's the fourth line or fourth row. You can see it varies by fiscal year. In fiscal year 22, it was 250,000, that other charges, and typically it's all for the cost allocation plan. Fiscal year 23 had $500,000 in other charges, and then the recommended budget for 24, it was 357,000, and then for next fiscal year, it's 373,000. So there was a small increase there. That's all I have for the Board of Supervisors.
And I just want to clarify, because I want to make sure this is my first budget where we're going in this detail. Do we have to open it up to public comment on each one of these separately? I'm assuming the answer is yes.
Yeah, because each budget unit is considered different.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I didn't want to break any rules. So before we bring it back to the board, Ramon, do you have anything else to add before we open it up to public comment?
Nothing more to add.
Okay, public comment, please.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card, and on Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comments.
Okay, bringing it back to the board. Any comments, concerns, questions? Sure, Supervisor Sotelo.
So forgive me for not knowing this, Ramon, but on it, it'll say 24-25 department requested. And then you have, will you go back to that slide? Will you pull it up? I'm just looking, yeah, right here. Okay, and then it's 24-25 CAO recommended budget. So if you go to the requested for, is an increase. And I'm just curious, why are we not including the increase in the requested? Like, why do we put the requested and then the recommended are two different amounts, and typically it's increasing in the recommended? When typically I'm assuming like the CAO would be doing this budget request. So why are those different?
The reason the department requested information is lower than the CAO recommended budget is because when we were working on department requested, on that part of the process, it's possible that all items were not included in the 24-25 department request, and that's because I'm the one that was doing it for multiple divisions under the administration office. So I may have missed it under the department requested part of the process. And when I reviewed the details again, if I noticed items were missing, then I would have included in the part of the CAO recommended part of the process.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Supervisor Kosmicki.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple areas. I, again, going to point out that, we're very tight this year, and now we now have a $360,000 gap to fill. I think, there's most of us probably would prefer to find ways to fill that without necessarily having to look at unfunding more positions, because that's realistically that or capital are probably the more likely areas we're going to be looking at to balance the budget. So I'm going to point out the Board of Supervisors has a $15,000 discretionary budget. Each of us has $3,000. I know it's not a huge dollar amount, but if we're chipping away and doing our best to get a balanced budget for this year at the least, I'm going to recommend that we eliminate the discretionary budget for the board. It's just basically each supervisor has a few $1,000s to spend in their, how they please, and it's just not at the top of the priority list or anywhere near it. So that would be one recommendation for me. And then along the same lines, I bring this up every year, but the lodging, transportation, training, meals accounts come to, I believe if my math is right, $47,000 for this next year. I'm one of 5. I've never used it, so maybe at least the 20% for me. I know at the beginning everyone's kind of going to stuff when they're in their first year, and the 3 supervisors that are kind of past that first phase of being a supervisor. You don't have all those initial required trainings. We will have one incoming supervisor that will have to at least go to the new supervisors training. But outside of that, I don't think Supervisor Zanger does as much anymore either. That's basically 40%. So I'm going to recommend that we cut it basically in half from the $47,000 as well, to try to chip away at that, getting toward a balanced budget. And I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Any comments?
Well, I'll just say
Supervisor
that
Sotelo?
I've found the trainings incredibly beneficial over the last year and a half, I guess it is now. And so, I think that we could be really mindful of it. I don't know that cutting it is going to be the best answer. I think having us up here with the most knowledge and training is incredibly important, not just for our staff, but I think for the Board of Supervisors as well. And I know that I've gained tremendous knowledge from some of the ones that I've attended. So I think the training is really, really valuable.
Supervisor Gonzalez?
I would concur. As I said, I'm a huge advocate for training, and I'm going to be a student of life forever, and so I would just hope that ability would be available to any supervisor who comes after me, has that ability to be able to take the training essential necessary for them to be able to do the job. And so I'm reluctant to cut it. And with regards to discretionary funds, I know that $3,000 is not a significant amount of money, but I know at one point, Supervisor Kazimicki, you had asked for an accounting of where our funds were going, and mine have gone to nonprofits who won't otherwise be able to meet their budget without my donation. And so I am going to hope that we allow that. I was surprised that the city of Hollister has $8,500 per council member to be able to spend. And so when I compare that to the measly $3,000 that we have, I was a little bit jealous. But I would hate to take that away, because I know that both Supervisor Curl and Sotelo at one point had put their money together to do something regarding economic development, and that was a benefit to the community. It was their discretionary funds, but they pulled their money together and were able to do something. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember it was some sort of benefit to the community regarding economic development. You guys had hired something, a consultant or something.
It was to go through our strategic plan.
Yes,
for
yes.
economic development.
But it was beneficial to the community. And so again, those were funds that we wouldn't be able to pull from the general fund otherwise. And so I would hate to lose that. And I know you, Supervisor Kazimicki, that you had bought cameras for the Anza Trail, which was quite, again, benevolent on your side, to give to the community. So I would just hate to see those funds to be cut. I would like to see them remain intact. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, Supervisor Zanger?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the importance of training and whatnot. I don't think we're talking about getting rid of the training budget, but I would support reducing it. Like I said, I'm not using a whole lot of it personally either. So yeah, I would support reducing it. The $15K for discretionary. Yeah, I'm aware the city of Hollister, I think they have it's $40K with the 5 of them or something like that. But I think it's kind of personally a little ridiculous that they have so much to throw around personally as city council members. And I don't necessarily, I'm not married to discretionary. I don't think it's a huge deal. I mean, it's $15K. I think it's probably, if we're looking to save money and we have to come up with money to balance the budget, I'm absolutely okay with removing that personally. I think it's $3K per supervisor. It's not a whole lot, but it's also, a matter of, look, we are trying to kind of pinch pennies here and make it all work. So I'm definitely okay with removing that personally.
Okay, with my comments, I'm probably the biggest user of travel and training, and I'm not going to hide it. I am on NACO. I travel to DC. I meet with our legislative representatives. This year was very hopefully profitable for us. We don't know yet, but we're looking at potentially $14 million coming in for roads. We may have $2 million coming in for communication. I think travel, especially if you're doing it to advocate for funding and build the relationships that you need to build with your legislative representatives, whether it be Sacramento or Washington, D.C. To me, it's worth every penny. I do not claim everything that is an expense for me. I only claim what I absolutely have to be able to make it work. But I do try to stay as frugal as possible. But I do not feel that cutting training or especially when you're doing it for the associations and building the relationships, I think it's a benefit. You may not agree with that, and I respect where you're coming from. And if you want to reduce it, right now, what's our actual cost on?
47 if you had all of them, lodging, transportation, training, and meals.
For actual?
That's what I got out of it, and I'm just asking to at least take my 20% out. I don't know why there would be any really debate about that, and if Dom wants to cut 10% of his, that's 30% right there. If we take that out, it really wouldn't have any effect on anyone else. I mean, otherwise, you're just basically using our allotment, which I don't think is necessarily fair either, so.
Okay, but
I don't do the travel training, so take mine out, that's 20%, his 10, that's 30, if we can do that.
Okay, I'm not following the numbers the same way you are. I'm looking at the actual cost versus the budget.
47 is what's budgeted, what I added up, between lodging, transportation, training, and meals. And I'm just asking to cut out 20% for my allotment, and 10% for Supervisor Zangers, which would be 30%, which is basically like $15,000.
I don't have a problem letting staff look at actual costs, because cutting, you're looking at saying that we're all traveling the same, and I'm saying we're not all traveling the same.
But that's what it's there for. I mean, it's not supposed to be 2 or 3 people do all the traveling. So if I'm not traveling at all, then I don't know why my apportionment would need to be there. That's all.
So historically, we've traveled for all of us to do the same. So I think this is a waste of talking about it right now. If the money is needed for being able to meet and balance the budget, I say look at everything, including travel, lodging across all departments. I don't want to keep harping on it. The one question I have is about rent. There's $2,000 for rent lease under expenses. Why do we have that?
Well, if I may, at one point Supervisor Kazamikian and I had space at the old.
Those were county buildings.
I know, but that was the only thing that I could think of that would be there.
There doesn't show that there's been any expenditures, and now we're adding in the request $2,000. That's the only thing that I saw in this budget unit that concerned me.
I know that the CIO was trying to accommodate for office staff for all 5 of us.
I believe that has to do with storage of some of the documents that were in the old courthouse and that are now being put in a storage facility.
Oh.
That's what that 2,000
So
is.
that are actual Board of Supervisors?
They have documents, is that correct, Vanessa?
Or is it clerk of the board? Sorry, no offense, we're the same.
Yeah, those were clerk of the board.
Yeah, clerk of the board files and stuff that was kept it was in the old courthouse that were.
So shouldn't that be in the clerk of the board budget?
Yeah, I think this is for something else.
Is it for something else? Okay.
Okay, so
I'm
if we could
looking
just
it
look
up.
at that $2,000, and then if, when you're looking at all travel and costs, if we can find some savings that will help support the request for administration, I think that would be great. Any other comments? Good. Okay, so moving on to CAO Budget Unit 15, item number 2, community programs.
So for community programs, we have $120,000 allocated to these programs. And this is the budget unit that includes an amount for senior services of $90,000. And here's the list of senior groups in the area that are receiving this service based on prior board approval. We also include in this community programs division $30,000 for the competitive grant. And it's really, there's nothing new in that budget unit.
And when you say competitive grant, you're meaning the nonprofit. Is that correct?
It's related to the nonprofits,
Okay,
yes.
just clarifying. Okay, opening it up to public comment.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card on Zoom. Please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
Supervisor Zanger?
Yeah, just a question. Why is it 30,000? Where'd that number come from for the?
I think it's historical. Ramon, I may be wrong.
That is correct. It's based on historical. It was a decision that was made by previous board members, and that figure, that $120,000 figure, just kind of has remained.
Okay, so then the non-historical part is just that it's a competitive grant as opposed to, I guess, what it used to be, right? That's the new.
Exactly. It may have been used for 120. The $30,000 item was probably used for other just contracts with nonprofits. And at this point, I believe the board had made a decision to move for pursuing like a competitive grant process. And so that's how much we have available in this budget unit.
Got it. Thanks.
Needs more clarity.
Supervisor Kozmicki?
Yeah, no, I've been around these processes as I know Supervisor Crowe has and others, but I mean, it's basically the board agreed to cap it at 120. It's been 120 for a long time, and it's but there was also a commitment to stay with the senior services in spite of capping it, and to actually increase senior services with the CPI, and then the remainder is essentially what the board's been doing for as far as long as I can remember, but I've obviously spoken out against it. Certain years it wasn't done because of economic issues, but essentially there's been a dollar amount that the board has decided to sort of pick its choices for nonprofit allocations, and now it's $30,000 basically. And I'll just point out again what I've just been along the same lines. It's the same thing I say every year, basically, but I think in particular this year, we're literally going to have to probably unfund a position or two here, or just not do capital projects if we want to balance the budget. I will not support, I support our nonprofit community, but they have other means of raising money. I don't think it's local government's purpose to subsidize nonprofits. And in a lot of cases, it's essentially amounted, I'm not saying that's the case now, but in a lot of cases I've been around, it's essentially amounted to political pandering in some cases. And so I can't support it. I think if we're really trying to balance this budget, $30,000 here and there is going to add up. And similarly to the discretionary thing, but I think this in particular, you're picking basically 3, 4, 5 nonprofits out of 150, 175 nonprofits. I mean, it's not going to make or break their budgets, and we have a really tight budget this year. Thanks.
Madam Chair, a follow-up question.
Sure.
For Ramon. So why is the 30,000 not shrinking in proportion if the senior services are getting a higher percentage? Is the total just going up? Because if we're moving the senior services up 3% or whatever it is each year, why is the 30,000 stagnant? Wouldn't it be taking from that 30 and adding to the senior services?
I'm going to let our administrative analysts respond to that question.
Great.
Hi, Board. I just want to add some clarity. Excuse me. In last year's budget, we did not include the competitive portion, only the senior service. It was discussed and eliminated to, like Supervisor Kozmicki mentioned, to increase the 3%. It's been at the 120 cap though prior to that, and that's where we brought it back to the 120. So the 120 is just the difference. The competitive grant amount used to be 40,000 when back in FY, I think 22,
Or
21,
before
22.
COVID, yeah.
Before
Yeah.
COVID. Correct, yeah. Because we had other fundings to, grant funding that went to nonprofits. So I hope that answers your question. We stopped it for a few years.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? No? Okay. We're not taking any action on these right now because we're leaving it open. So my only comment on this is I still support the nonprofits as long as they're helping relieve us to meet our strategic goals for areas that the county cannot afford to staff or put money. So the grant program that we were initiating had it connected to the strategic plan and how it would complement what our goals are without having to add costs to departments. So I'd still like that to continue. That's where I'm at on this. And but when it comes down to being able to make or break to be able to move forward with the request that is coming out of the CAO's office, I don't mind having that be an area to consider, but it's not my first choice.
I agree with you on that, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to item number 3, and that is County Council Budget Unit number 25.
So for the county council budget, the salaries and expenses increased by about 26%. And the reason for that large jump compared to other departments or divisions is because we do have, I believe, one staff member that is potentially retiring next fiscal year. So so we had to budget for that cost. Overall, their expenses increased by about 12%, and that's that middle of the slide there where it says expenses. If we look at the 2.2 million for 23-24 CAO recommended, the increase for 24-25 is 2.5 million. So roughly about $300,000 again is in that salary and benefits line item. The salary and benefits went from 1 million to 1.3 million. And that's a combination of 6% increase in cost of living adjustment, increase to healthcare costs, the 7% COLA from last year, and then the 6% anticipated in October of this year. And then in addition, the retirement of the employee. Their services and supplies did not have a large increase. It's very minimal. It went from 1.248 to 1.25. County Council, anything else you'd like to add about this budget unit?
No, just a question. Is the contract is in the service and supplies section?
Yes, it would be included in that section.
I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, then let's open it up to public comment.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card on Zoom. Please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
Okay, bringing it back to the board. Any questions, comments?
Just clarification, I guess, tomorrow we're going to be considering a contract. I think there's at least part of the explanation, just if anyone's watching in TV land, there's going to be potentially a short-term hit, long-term savings, but going to a contract model being proposed tomorrow would essentially, over the long term, save money, but there could be some costs in the short term. So.
Good. Okay, and thank you for making that clarification because I was going to do the same. I have no comment on this, and tomorrow if you tune into the board meeting, you'll see what's being proposed. So with that, we're going to move on to item number 4 through 6, which is the county library budget unit number 55.
So for the county library, we have a minimal increase to salaries and benefits of 8%. The interim librarian implemented reductions to temporary staff hours. Their other charges increased due to cost plan by $311,000. And so the other charges item, you can see it went from $273,000 in the 23-24 CAO recommended budget to $500,000. It's $585,000. That's a significant jump, and that is related to the cost plan, which there's no way around that. It just kind of is what it is because the auditor controller works with an external party. They do a lot of the calculations, and based on their calculations, they provide a report. And once the auditor's office has that report, they send it to me, and I include these costs as part of the recommended budget. Let me see. In fiscal year 23, we do see that the library had $13 million in revenues, $10 million in expenses, and the reason for that is because of the federal grant they received for, hotspots and Chromebooks, thank you. And so that's the reason why we have one fiscal year with, a very high expense, high revenues, high expenses. But their fiscal year 22 actuals revenues are $300,000, and that's typically from grants that the library receives. Their expenses are about $1.8 million, at least in fiscal year 22. And so in fiscal year 24, their expenses were still high because they still needed to complete the Chromebooks and some of the federal funding that they had received in prior fiscal years were completed in the current fiscal year. And then we see that in fiscal year 24-25, their costs are coming back down to what a normal operational needs would be for the library. Their revenues did go down to $98,000. Again, those are typically grants they receive, state grants and sometimes private grants. So that $2.3 million worth of expenses in total are for $1.2 million worth of salaries and expenses, salaries and benefits, and then services and supplies, about $200,000. Again, the current interim librarian made a lot of reductions to their budgets. He did a pretty good job at looking at, the operations and whether or not a lot of these expenses were needed. And we have Manny in the audience if he wants to add anything else.
Nope. Okay, so if we have questions, we'll bring Manny up. So let's open it up to public comment.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card. On Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
Okay, bringing it back to the board. Comments? Supervisor Sotelo?
I have a couple questions on the revenue side. Are we overestimating the revenue coming in for the library? Because it looks like based on actuals, it looks like we may be overestimating a bit there. Like, is the city of Hollister, did they end up giving us $15,000 for fiscal year 23-24?
I would have to defer to the county administrative office to answer that question. I don't know, because
I don't have that information in front of me, but I can get that.
Okay, because there's that one, and then there's the next one was library services fines. The 22-23 actual was just over $1,800. Yet last year we put, $9,000 for revenue. This year we've scaled it back a little bit to $5,000. But again, is that realistic? And then library copier services was actual $409. And then for 23-24, we budgeted for $3,000 getting for revenue. And then again, $3,000 for this year. And I'm just curious, again, it's not a lot of money, but every little bit's going to add up, and if our revenue isn't accurate in that area, we may have a shortfall. So just curious on the revenue end.
if I could answer that, Manny Gonzalez, interim librarian. The biggest chunk of the revenues we get are from state grants. So I will check with Ramon and look at those numbers again. Again, those are based on historical, but I mean, it just depends on every year by year. It just depends. So I will check with Ramon and we'll look at better look at that. So.
Thank you, Manny. Any other comments? Supervisor Kosmicki.
Thank you. Yeah, just first off, want to laud Manny for the work you've done on this overall, the budget, everything, basically in light of all the turmoil that's going on and the suspected criminal activity that's been going on there in the past. And I appreciate what you've done with the budget, and it seems like it's we're in good shape. Aside from the fact that I do believe this is one of those areas we've discussed that the city of Hollister wants us to contribute more in certain other areas, this needs to be part of the discussion going forward. As far as, this is essentially a city library, but the county's paying for it. I think that pointing out that the city contributes $15,000 a year really underscores how ludicrous the situation is. It really should be a city-county library, if not just a city library. It largely serves city residents. Don't want to get rid of the library, very supportive of it, but we got to, it's expensive to run a library, and the city needs to step up and pay more of it. Thanks.
Any other comments? Okay, so thank you, Manny. My only comments on the library is one, thank you, Manny, so much for all the work that you've done. I do think we need to still have a conversation about shared services across multiple areas in the county when it comes to city versus county cost. And that's a conversation I think that we have going on at intergovernmental. So we'll keep that going on. So now we're going to move on to item number, it would be 7 through 12, which is the sheriff's budget unit number 40.
So item number 7, sheriff operations. There, it doesn't show on the slide because it's a lot of information to put on one slide, so I summarize it. We have the revenues and the expenses, and even though it has summary information, I did review the increase to salaries and benefits, and that was a 9% increase, which again related to the cost of living adjustment. Let's see, the increase went from about 6.6 million to 7.2 million, and like I said, it's about 9%, so it's actually in line with a lot of other departments as well. The overall increase was about 23%. Some of the items that I noticed increased were, again, cost allocation plan. I have it as 589,000. Fixed asset vehicles, I have $403,000 for vehicles. Services, 619, one of the 619 accounts, I think in total, it only increased about $75,000, which is not a lot, considering it's a large department. And then one of the, I believe, transfer out accounts includes $25,000 for a capital project. I believe there may have been a system glitch. I think when I looked online, it appeared that there were about like a $400,000 increase. But when I looked at the details in a spreadsheet I have from the same download of the budget for the sheriff's operations, I didn't find a $400,000, like a $411,000 cost. So I'll look at why I may have to contact OpenGov for that piece. But in case any of you were reviewing the details and you were wondering, like, why did it go from 0 in one fiscal year to 411,000? The jump is actually only 25,000. And that's all I have for the sheriff operations. I don't know if you want me to.
Why don't you do all of them, and then we'll discuss them together.
Okay. The next budget unit is sheriff communications. This is where the Santa Cruz Regional 911 contract is recorded. And for this budget unit, again, there was an overall increase of about 8%, which is not very high. It's about $75,000. The salaries and benefits had an increase of 11%, and that's related to the cost of living adjustments that we went through during negotiations. Let's see, the next budget unit is the Unified Narcotics Enforcement Team. And that one, they actually reduced their services and supplies by $128,000. And in this case, this budget unit is showing revenues greater than expenses at $140,000, and that's on the CAO recommended budget on the right-hand side column. The next budget unit is Sheriff Corrections. That's for the jail facilities. And in this one, their salaries and benefits increased about 10%, which is $500,000. It went from 5.2 million in the 23-24 recommended budget to 5.8 million in the 24-25 CAO recommended budget. And in the department request, the reason for that $7 million figure for salaries and benefits is because of the item that was brought to the board in May for all the positions that were requested, specifically for the jail. So the 24-25 recommended budget removed all those positions being requested, in part because administration, the HR department is working on a few items that will address operational needs at the jail. And maybe Henny can, talk to that part of.
Yes, I can.
Go right ahead.
So we're just looking at, again, balancing the budget and figuring out how to move some allocations around, and at the same time as the jail has to be staffed. And so there's some things that are in play right now. One is, since we had the first meeting with, we originally had talked about some of the vacant positions in the corrections classification, which were 7 vacant positions. Since June 5th, they've hired 1 CO who's been hired, correction officer. And then as of the 13th, last week, Thursday, it looks like 1 more offer letter has been sent out. So there were people in the pipeline to be hired for corrections. And so out of that 7 that would leave, that brings it down to 5 vacant positions. What we were proposing, what admin was proposing is that through looking at some of the classification and some of the work in the jail, and this isn't addressing the 2 different sides of the jail, because I know that the sheriff and Commander Corral have information as well, but we were looking at trying to help with manage the operations part, where we have maybe a lower classification that's doing some of the lower end clerical the technical role, which is working behind the control units, bookings, that sort of thing, instead of having a correctional officer in that position. So that would eliminate correctional officers sitting in those seats and putting them out on the floor. So that was the goal of what admin was looking at, was how to maybe just be able to keep control officers or corrections officers on the floor versus in those units. So with that conversion, we were looking at what was the leftover 5 vacancy correctional officer positions and converting those over to the non-safety clerical technical support staff in the jail. So those are the pieces that we had looked at. And that was out of the ones that were already allocated, the correction officers. So we would be pulling them out and converting them to a lower classification.
Okay. Keep going. I think we have 1 more or 2 more.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
So the Ag and Rural Crime Grants, this is where the Sheriff's Office accounts for a lot of the grants they receive. Overall expenses were minor. We had a 1.5% increase to their overall expenses. That's $11,000. And in this case, again, the revenues are greater than expenses. On the far right-hand side, you can see revenues are $837,000 of anticipated grant revenue, and their total expenses are $786,000. So that leaves $50,000 in surplus for the grant budget unit. The next budget unit is the coroner's division, and in this case, overall expenses increased by about $57,000. This was due in large part to physician contracted services under new contract. That's a $47,000 increase to their contract. They had increase in outside labor and the cost allocation plan. The outside labor was $7,000, cost allocation plan was $2,000. So that was the main reason for the increases to this budget unit. And that's it for these items right now.
Okay, before we open it to public comment, is there anything you want to add, or we go to public comment and then back to us? You're good? Okay, so let's open it up to public comment.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card. On Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
Okay, hearing no public comment, bringing it back to the board. Questions, comments, concerns? Anybody?
Yeah, I mean,
Supervisor
I wouldn't,
Kozmicki?
yeah, I wouldn't, certainly want to hear from the sheriff as well, but I think as long as, I think this looks like a creative approach between the sheriff and HR, and I think it seems reasonable as far as the technicians go. I do have a separate request. I know we've talked in the past about, I know the sheriff will have comments about the San Juan Bautista area, and I've heard this narrative lately that the Board of Supervisors doesn't support adding a second San Juan Bautista deputy, which they're willing to fully fund at I believe it's $150,000 in their budget. It's ready to go. So I'm hoping that we can have a conversation about adding the second San Juan Bautista deputy, even if it means recruiting specifically. I don't know how that all works with HR and operations and the sheriff, but having that conversation about, I know in the past, I don't want to speak for the sheriff, that's what I want to open it up to him, but I think it was more the overall picture and allocating resources and concerns about allocating resources. But my thought was, as long as they're willing to fund the position, it's still another available deputy that, if you recruit specifically for San Juan, there's an understanding going into it that, hey, you're going to be working in this area. And again, I'm just throwing that out there. I know that's not my role. It's HR and the sheriff. But if it's specific to that area, I just don't see why we wouldn't at least start the process of getting that second San Juan Bautista deputy, as long as it would be cost neutral, basically. That was my concern, because I do support having a second San Juan Bautista deputy in like I said, there's been this narrative that I've heard a couple times lately that the board basically is rejecting that, and I don't think that's necessarily, it's more complicated. Yeah.
Come on up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Supervisor Kozmicki, just for that specific item that you're talking about, I have not got the green light from the city of San Juan Bautista for that second deputy. I know that it's been discussed. I didn't really follow their budget process, but working with their city manager, we kind of had a gentleman's agreement that he wasn't sure if they're going to move forward with that yet. We have been wanting that, but overall, more than that, the contract that we have with the city of San Juan Bautista is ridiculous. They only pay the salary and benefits for a deputy, and it's not enough for what they're contributing. So we've been working with the city and with our representative from county council to try to restructure that contract. There are no built-in costs for fuel, vehicle maintenance, administrative investigations outside of the patrol hours. I've provided them with an example of what the city of Colfax does with the Placer County Sheriff's Office. City of Colfax, 2,000 people, a couple square miles. It's very, very similar. And their contract is about 4 times the amount of what San Juan is paying. So we're very open to providing another deputy sheriff there. Matter of fact, that helps us. If I did get the green light from the city manager to say our funding is here, we would bring that item to this board to add that position. I do think, though, what I have told the city manager is that when we're already as short as we are, it's difficult because we also have to fill just regular positions. And we found ourselves recently with a medical issue and with a promotion that we weren't able to fulfill even this Spring Grove contract. So we're having to rotate deputy to fulfill that contract that I committed to. We're having to rotate a different deputy. School's out now, but until the end of school, we had to rotate a separate deputy every day in there to cover that contract. And some of that was on overtime. So that was really difficult for us. So a lot of it's just an overall numbers issue. It's not that the board's not supportive to take revenue in to fund a position. I think that the board's always been supportive of that.
I appreciate that. And if I may, Madam Chair, yeah, as long as there can be, because I did talk to Don, he was nice enough. I think it was just late in the week last week I caught him, and he said they would be ready to go. And a couple of the council members have sort of griped at me a little bit about, why don't you guys support this? We're going to,
I'm getting messages.
Fund it. So that's why if we can have that conversation maybe before the next budget hearing, even if it's a halftime role or something we could work on, or some, not halftime, but a half position or something added, because they're just looking for something added. And I understand what you're saying with costs and.
Yeah, I think that we're not looking to cost them out of it, but I think we're looking to be reasonable. I mean, if we have overhead, we have supervision of those positions, we have vehicles going back and forth. In the past, they used to provide a vehicle. They don't provide a vehicle anymore. If we have put equipment in a vehicle, it's extremely, the equipment that goes in the car is more expensive than the car. They're not providing for any of that. So I think that to be transparent with the community, we're providing this service, and so they should also be paying for, I mean, it really goes back to almost like the library discussion. They should be paying for what we're giving them, and they're getting a hell of a deal.
But do we also get sort of a, and this is just, I'm not claiming to be expert in your area, but sort of a tangential benefit because that deputy's ready to roll if something happens, you know, some major incident happens or something, or are they pretty much stuck in San Juan and?
Well, if you talk to the city of San Juan Bautista, they don't want them to leave the city limit. But we have an agreement that, you know, in an emergency, they do leave the city limits of San Juan Bautista. We actually had a council member for a while that wanted us to have San Juan, because this is when San Juan used to provide a car, have the deputy drive a county sheriff's car to the city, switch all of his gear into the city car, not let that car leave the city limit. And if he had to leave the city limit, switch all of his stuff. And so we've had those type of interactions in the past with an old council. So, I mean, the contracted services for dedicated patrols to the city limits of San Juan Bautista. And I do think that they've been very reasonable. We have definitely taken the San Juan deputy and rolled him out to Rocks Road and 101 for injury crashes and up San Juan Canyon. We've done that, but that can't be their primary focus. But so there are benefits, right? We do have someone stationed out there. And ideally, when we get up to staffing, then that's the goal. That's why we've Captain Eiler really worked to get that substation over there in Windmill Market, so we had a home base for them to actually not have an excuse to not be in the city when they're working there, because if they're writing reports and doing that type of stuff, we wanted them to have a place to be there and not use that as a reason to leave the city and come back over here. So,
right.
Sorry, long-winded answer for a short question.
No, and I appreciate that. I just, I think a lot of it's just presence and just,
correct.
You know, maybe working with the San Juan on some level of compromise, like, hey, you know, if we're there, here, and there, it's better than never being there, sort of a thing. And we're just trying to avoid those, like the break-ins, series of break-ins and all that sort of stuff, because it's San Juan. There's not going to be, we're not expecting any earth-shattering crime or anything, but I appreciate it. If we could just maybe have a conversation with them.
For sure. It's ongoing, and I'll reach out to the city manager after this meeting, and that's honestly news to me. If it's green lighted to fund a second deputy, I think that's something we've been talking about for a long time.
Great. Appreciate it.
Supervisor Gonzalez.
Yes, Eric, if you don't mind staying up there, please. While I appreciate the desire for San Juan to be able to fund an officer, I'm rather concerned with their small geographic location that we as a county only have 2 officers to patrol this entire area during a shift. And so bottom line, I think we as a board need to support additional staffing for your department. That goes without saying, some of the things that have happened at the jail, you know, recently, and I don't want to bring up any kind of, you know, taboo subject, but I just think that we as a board need to fund you adequately so that you can have the staffing levels that you need, that you require to do the job.
I appreciate that. I went through, I landed here in 2014. I read through every grand jury report from 2014 to now, and every grand jury report in the jail, except for 1 year they didn't do one, and I think of 1 year that they didn't address it, but it's addressed the need for staffing in the jail and for 24-hour medical. Those are 2 of the recurring themes that have happened in that jail, and I think those are things that expose us to liability. And I know that we have open positions. I think that the admin's making a little more rosy than I think our numbers show, but what we show right now is that we have 19 allocated correctional officer positions. And so what that means for us is that 3 of them are out for reasons that we can't go into in this meeting, but we have 3 of them out, which leaves us with 16 correctional officers. We transferred 1 to the academy to come to promote to the street. So that lets us with 15. We have 1 on administrative leave, which leaves us with 14 correctional officers. We just had a sergeant come in and quit without notice. And we have another sergeant that's going to be leaving within a couple weeks. So that's going to take us down to 14 correctional officers and 2 sergeants to run 2 facilities. So Commander Corral's already started the process to shut down the new housing units in our second facility because we can't staff it. So although we are interested in, so just to be clear, we did not ask for more correctional officers this year. we had been working with the CAO's office and with HR, and we all together as a team agreed that we had staff that were working out of class. We had correctional officers doing duties that their time could be spent on the floor doing correctional officer duties and not in a control bubble pushing buttons. Not to say that work's not important, but it's a different level of work. Right. So we're paying for a correctional officer to sit in a glass room and watch computer screens. So our ask was to civilianize that so that it would free those people up to go back onto the floor. The recommendation from the CAO's office is to cut correctional officers and convert them to technicians. I understand the intent there, but that's not going to work operationally for our office. To go backwards in correctional officers just to civilianize those positions, it's not going to work. So at a minimum, what I would ask this board is to not do that. Just leave it status quo. Don't add any positions. Don't cut any positions. Just leave us where we were last year, because we have catching up to do with that. And I had met with staff before the negotiations in this county. I met with staff and I told staff, I was asked, do you want to focus on positions or salary? And I said salary. We can't fill the positions that we have because of salary. And I understand the county, it is not fallen on deaf ears that those increases. Unfortunately, we're so far behind that those increases didn't even keep us in line with what everyone else is getting. So even though we have those increases, we are still behind. And so when we have staff that come in and we're trying to professionalize this, there was a movement along, Commander Corral brought this up, there's a movement years ago to professionalize police services in the state of California. Some places require college degrees. That's now coming. There will be a modern police degree required for every police officer in the state of California within the next 2 years. We're fighting back on that a little bit to try to make it an and/or, because they were going to have a 4-year degree and a modern policing degree. We've got the legislature to pull back on that a little bit and make it one or the other. We can't recruit now for the rate that we're paying. If we're going to require a 4-year degree or a modern policing degree, that's going to take our pool even lower. And there's a reason that we've modernized policing in California. It's because there was a lot of corruption historically in policing when we lowered the standard. And so we have these open positions because we as an administration refuse to lower the standard and bring people in here that don't deserve to have this job. And so because of that, we're running short. And until we raise the pay, we're not going to attract qualified candidates. And so as the sheriff, I have a choice: run short and run our people into the ground, or bring in people that shouldn't be working here. And we all live here, and none of you want that. None of you want dirty cops out there or people that don't deserve to have this job. Then we're going to be spending tens of thousands of dollars on internal affairs investigations and defending firing people because we have people that don't belong in this position. So I'm not trying to be unrealistic at any point when I address this board, but I have a community looking at me and I have my staff looking at me. And it was brought up earlier today that, we were told not to ask for anything. You could tell me that all day. I am going to publicly tell you what I think this community needs. It's this board's tough job to say yes, no, or our priorities are here or our priorities are there. But that shouldn't be a frustration for anybody. That's just transparency. I need these positions to police this community appropriately. We are behind. You're right. On patrol, I am down to 10 people assigned to patrol. That's deputy sheriffs. And I have some sergeants too. There's 3 of 4 right now. But that's 2 to 3 people per shift for 1,400 square miles. And then you factor in that I have a constitutional requirement to staff the courts. We have revenue coming in for that. I appreciate that. So that's a non-issue for us, but I have to staff those courts. I don't have a choice. And then we're actually looking in the jail side, we're researching today. Can we stop doing transportation? Can we stop offering custody alternative programs? Can we legally do that? Because that takes staff time. Can we legally cut programs in the jail because that takes staff time? So we are internally doing all of those things daily to try to figure out how we're going to keep from drowning. And I'm just trying to be honest with everybody. Like, I appreciate what's been done in the years past. We can all look over the records and see where we were and where we're going. And that's all I've ever asked, is to be able to chip away at this stuff. I'm not expecting decades of neglect to be fixed in 1 year. I'm not. I promise you that, I'm not. But if I don't put it on record that when my staff gets hurt and they're looking at me and they're saying, we've told you we're understaffed, we don't have enough, our vehicles don't work, we don't have the right equipment, it's my job as the sheriff to stand in front of the community and in front of the board and say, this is where we need to be, and we all have to work together to try to get there. And so all I was asking like now, but based on what the recommendations are in the budget, we're not going to be kicking rocks and being all angry leaving this meeting, but I would ask you to disregard the recommendation of cutting correctional officer positions for civilian positions and just leave it status quo and just don't give us anything. That would be my request. And then Kelly, I think I'm supposed to also add that something that wasn't there is it's offset with revenue, but we have $80,000 that I think probably we forgot to tell Ramon about, or I'll take responsibility for it, for live scan fingerprint machines, but it's offset by RAN money, the was it Regional Access Network or something Access Network? It's offset by, there's no cost to the general fund, but we're gonna have to put that $80,000 into the budget, and those are the machines that go to the police department and the jail. I think Mariposa Tax Service has one. It's for the live scan fingerprinting. It's a zero net cost to the county, but that wasn't in there. Sorry for that long-winded.
That's okay. We're going to keep going here, so don't go anywhere.
That's fine.
Supervisor Zanger.
Yeah, thank you. A couple questions. So just so to be clear, the proposed HR jail solution, you'd like not to go with that, just leave it status quo. You're saying that's preferred as opposed to the shifting of roles there, right? Just
of those two options, I would pick
of those two
to just leave it status quo.
Okay. And then you said 3 jail positions are out. Is that related to the escape incident that just happened?
No, those are for protected reasons.
Okay. And then just as far as deputies go, so there's 2 on patrol right now, right?
There's probably, what's today? We probably have 3, probably a sergeant and 2.
Okay, so the 2 to 3 depending on the day?
Yeah, and the issue is that we got away from here, and I think that's what it terrifies us a little bit, is that sergeants are supposed to supervise what's happening, and our sergeants end up doing work. So you may have a sergeant on a call in Aromas while the people they're supposed to be supervising are in Tres Pinos, and that's not a good model. We may as well just abolish sergeants and not have supervision on the street. So oftentimes when I say we have 2 people working, that's 2 deputy sheriffs taking calls in a patrol car, non-supervisory, but there are times that we have 3 because we have a sergeant on.
Okay. Was that a real suggestion to abolish sergeants, or is that like?
The undersheriff and I have definitely discussed that, yes.
Okay. And then right now, as far as deputies that are, positions for deputies that are like for patrol that are funded, how many are funded but vacant right now?
So, and again, all of our numbers are showing a little bit different, so I'm not sure why that is, but I have that for deputy sheriffs, I have that we have 25 funded allocated positions. Of those, I have 19 filled, but 1 person I transferred to the jail, 2 I have out on leave. 2 are bailiffs, 1's in San Juan, 1's in SRO, 2 are detectives, so that's 10 on patrol.
Okay, so you could hire 6 right now, right? If you had the talent pool and the background and all that, I mean, I'm just saying for funding purposes. Okay, is there any that are in the pipeline right now?
Verena? So 9 total, but probably 4 we're seriously looking at.
Okay.
Most of these I know we've said this before, but most people that apply, they don't make it very far in the process, and they get eliminated.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Makes sense. Okay. So then you wouldn't need, I guess, like you said, you wouldn't need new positions right now for deputies. You just would, I guess, need more attractive, reasons, right, for them to work here, right? I mean, but you have the vacancies, right? Just so we're
and so vacancies. when we put in, I think Kelly, did we put in for 3 deputy sheriffs in our ask? Again, that's just a document that we need to get there in the future. But yes, we do have open positions today that we can fill, that we're struggling filling. But as we look forward into the future, when we get those, we've been really lucky, and we've had pools of candidates come in where we're able to snatch 3, 4 up at a time. That's ideal, and then we just got to hold on to them.
Yeah, right. Okay, thanks.
Supervisor Sotelo? Nope. Nope.
I had a follow-up, if that's.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, because we went into this other conversation, so just to follow up on that. So I know, like Supervisor Gonzalez is throwing out, I support, and I think if we could afford to fund double the deputies, that would be great, because it's better public safety. But we have an issue here where we just approved a contract relatively recently, and it was a very healthy increase. And I just want to know, I know this isn't your job, but if we add hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, which is realistically what we're talking about here in your ideal world, which I get, you got to push for what you got to push for. I would just pose the question, where are we cutting? Because you got to balance the budget. And where are we cutting outside of one-time monies don't make sense. Everybody kind of knows that it's extraordinarily irresponsible to use one-time monies for salaries and benefits. So that's just, we can all say we support everything, but I've gone through some things here, and there's been a lot of support. And I guess I was doing that for a reason to an extent, because you can't support everything. You just can't. If you want everything that we can't afford, you got to find a way to cut something somewhere. And so either you support the deputies or you are open-minded to eliminating other things. And that's how the world works in real world budgeting. And I just want to say that, because we can all sit up here and say we support, and it's fine, but it doesn't mean anything unless you're also offering what dollar amount and where you're going to cut to get a balanced budget. That's not targeted toward you, Sheriff. That's just a broad statement about our role as a board of supervisors, because we've got to cut something if we're going to add something. And that's, as you said, the challenge of our role. And I just want to say that please don't throw out ideas to just that you love everything unless you're willing to cut to make the difference up, to balance the budget. Thank you.
I did forget a question I had.
Sure, Supervisor Zanger.
Thank you. The resource officer at Spring Grove, going forward right now, is the plan basically just status quo? That's going to be ongoing in the years coming?
We've selected a replacement for next school year.
Okay. And then, but there's expected to be the following school year and so on, like the same one resource officer. And then, are any of your schools have a resource officer like that?
We've been contacted by a few schools, so the schools pay for it. They pay on the revenue side, so Spring Grove's paying for that time.
Right.
And so it's really tough. We've had other schools come to us and say that they're looking for funding, and it goes back to the San Juan thing. Even when I pulled Deputy Cedeno from patrol and put him in Spring Grove, that was right after Uvalde shooting happened. It was right after cops made a lot of really poor decisions in Texas and people lost their lives. And the Spring Grove School District had funding and a request, and I honestly didn't feel that I was in a position to say no. Even though we were short on patrol. So I pulled and left patrol even shorter to put a person in there. The issue is, if you don't know Deputy Cedeno, he's one of the best that we have. He excels at everything that he does. He has the most amazing attitude of probably anybody I've ever met. And he finished #1 for a new assignment. And so we gave him that new assignment to the chagrin of the people at Spring Grove. But they're getting an amazing replacement in Deputy Yaxel Pastrana. She's up for the challenge, and when she's ready to get back in there, I think that they're going to have a phenomenal school resource officer there. But yeah, we're open to it.
And I assume it's similar to San Juan, where so they're paying for him to be there. But if there is an emergency, that is an extra guy you have that would leave the school?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And he has done that. And Superintendent Bernosky and Mr. Zanella from their board, actually their whole board, they're very understanding and open about that. Now I don't like that, because I feel like if the school resource officer gets pulled away from the school that they're paying for him to be there, and something happens and they're not there, I don't like that exposure. But the community understands the overarching need. And so, yes, Deputy Cedeno has definitely left the school to assist in emergencies, yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other comments.
Well, I would just say that, one of the ways we can look at it is, we've got all these needs. I guess I don't immediately look at, yes, right now we have to immediately look at some cuts and scaling back on some things. But I think that this board, we've got to start recognizing, we've got to start looking for revenue. We've got to do more to bring revenue into this community, because cutting is not going to be the answer to move forward and get to the next place for this community. So I guess it's important. I just want to say, from my point of view, it's not just about cutting. It's about starting to think outside the box and start to bring some revenue in. So that's all I wanted to say, but thank you.
Okay, well, that's what I get for letting you go, because that's what I was going to say. It's about revenue generation, and we have to start looking, this board has to start looking at how revenue can be brought into this community on an ongoing basis. Cuts, yes, during budget time, we got to make cuts and we got to make the tough decisions, but we also need, and I appreciate so much your perspective of where we're at, and coming up here and saying, I'd rather stay status quo. I appreciate, that feedback. But we need to be looking at the long-term goal. We need to be hearing not just from the Sheriff's Department, but from all the departments of what their long-term needs are, and come up with plans on how to structure and move forward to chip away at that. It will not happen in one fiscal year. It won't happen in 5 fiscal years. Some of this, it took us years to get into this hole. And I mean, if you go back to, if you were here in 2012, and we're still recovering from what happened in 2012 with all of those layoffs. And that was a terrible time. And I felt sorry for every elected official that was on this board, because they made really excruciatingly painful cuts that hurt lives and services in our community. So I appreciate where you're coming from. What I'm asking for is that we start looking at things with a long-term lens and how we can start to chip away. This board has to really recognize that we have to look at revenue generation, and that means tightening the belt in some areas where we may be a little not this is where I keep going back to the contract and procurement. I mean, if we start really looking at where our negotiations are with our contracts and start holding all of the individuals outside of our organization accountable for what their duties are, and really squeeze them so that we get every penny out of the contracts that we're paying for, it'll be worth its weight in gold, because we'll be getting more services instead of having unmanaged contracts. So I feel like there's some big ticket items that could really start to show some efficiencies, but those are my long-term goals, and they're not going to happen overnight. But then recruitment challenges and how to address the recruitment challenges long-term. If that means we have to start looking at, you have X number of positions that have been vacant for so long, do we have to start thinking outside of the box of, do we start cutting positions to up the salaries to retain and recruit people? Is that something that is being discussed? And then start chipping away at the revenue needs, because, I love that San Juan is going to be able to fund, another potential deputy for them, but we can't even fund a South County deputy. And we've got plenty of residents in South County that need life safety needs, and unfortunately, it's something we're going to have to look at a long-term solution. So I appreciate you being here and just giving your 2 cents on everything and understanding this is a tough role. This is the part of the job I really don't like.
Well, I'll just close.
Don't like it.
Well, maybe I'll close, or maybe this will generate more feedback, but I don't think anybody felt the weight of a person getting out of our custodial facility like I did. It was the most frustrating and borderline embarrassing thing to happen, followed by amazing work by our staff to get this people back into custody, or this person and the people that helped them. But I had to bear that responsibility, and my staff had to bear that responsibility, and that's tough. So that's something that we take on. And so I don't pretend that you all don't take on similar type of difficult decisions. I'm in a position that I get to champion public safety. I head the office of the sheriff, coroner, and marshal. And so I'm in a position that I love all of my friends here, and I want everybody to be successful. And it's really hard every time we stand up here and ask you for something, because I know that that's potentially taking away something that somebody else needs. And I have friends and family that work for this county, and I know that every single department is running short. Every single department is working their tails off, and every single department and office needs stuff from you. And that's like the most difficult thing for you all, is to figure that out. So I have said, I'm sure you've all seen it that I've been disappointed by the priorities of the county. And so I'll just frame that in this instance. We just saw from Ramon, who's been amazing to work with. I'm sure you all feel the same. And if I don't have Kelly Kennedy stick around through as long as this community feels that I should be their sheriff, then I'm probably going to need to retire, because she's absolutely incredible with what she does for us. But I'll just finish with this. We saw on the slide that this county funds 6.7% of the general fund to public safety. Our neighbors, Hollister, they are funding, hold on, 56% of their budget goes to public safety. I'm not saying we're Hollister, but that's just a neighbor. And then I'm just trying to be fair and take another county that's like us. We talk about Tehama County a lot. Even little Tehama County spends 15% of their budget on public safety. So when I talk about priorities, that's not that I'm talking about support. It's just that I do think, as Supervisor Kosmicki is saying, what I'm asking the board to do is to make hard decisions and prioritize public safety. If you're able to do that, I think that's better for the community. And if you're unable to do that, then we're going to work with you to try to do the best job we can with what we're given. But I promise you, it's been difficult the last few weeks to not. It's been difficult the last few weeks to soldier on and keep being the person that I think I am, which is I think our office has proven that we're team players, and we want to do what's best for everybody. We want to help everybody out, and we want to do all the extra stuff. And I'm balancing that with running my staff into the ground and not overcommitting them. So you're going to see me struggle with that for a little bit probably here over the short term. But I promise you I'm not going to change who I am or why I'm here. And I appreciate everybody in the community that's constantly reaching out to me and supporting our office. We're blessed to have a ton of support in this community. And I just appreciate being able to speak to all of you. And I really appreciate the work that Ramon has done, because of all of us, he has the most thankless and difficult job probably during this process. So if you don't have anything else, that's all I have.
Thank you, Sheriff. Anything to add? I'm just going to say, as a former county employee, I feel you. I get it. I know. The working into the ground, it's painful. And the constant, maybe next year, maybe next year, maybe next year, it's painful to hear and hard to keep moving forward. But I want you to know that I'm committed, and I believe that this board is committed to addressing some of our challenges like revenue generation, but also looking at long-term goals and chipping away at them and being more strategic and out-of-the-box thinking. So I just want to thank you so much for your comments today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. So moving on, we're going to move on to, if everybody's okay, we're going to keep going. RMA planning, unit number 650. It's item number 13, economic development.
Our next item is Division 1271, Economic Development. And this is the budget unit that we use for economic development, such as economic partnerships. Let me see, Chamber of Commerce. These are membership costs that you see up on the screen. We also have allocations for potentially the Resource Conservation District, small business outreach, tourism marketing plan or other, and economic opportunities. At this time, the administrative office is recommending to keep the economic development budget at $150,000, and we can look at economic opportunities at a later date, such as Economic Development Committee meeting. Again, this budget unit is status quo. no increases, just keep it the same.
Okay, let's open it up to public comment.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card. On Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
Okay, seeing no public comment, bring it back to staff, or to the board. Oh, Supervisor Zanger?
Yeah, thank you. A couple of these, I don't feel that we get a real tangible benefit from, like the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. I know they recently gave a presentation and they spent, I don't know how much time and money to tell us that, you know, houses were expensive and we needed more jobs. And I mean, this is stuff that we obviously know. And so stuff like this $5,000 membership fee, I'd be interested in pulling out of that. I just, like I said, I don't think it's a good use of $5,000 if we're trying to chip away and put money into things that, you know, are a lot more important for the community. A couple others as well, I'd be interested to hear the board's thoughts on as far as like the business council and the chamber. I'm not sure exactly what we get out of these memberships, so that's all.
Supervisors, anybody? No? Supervisor?
Yeah, I would echo what Supervisor Zanger said. I think we have to look really hard at a lot of these things, whether we're getting tangible benefits out of them. I understand there's obviously always been arguments in favor of, you know, having these partnerships. I just haven't seen really any benefit from, especially the large dollar amount, the $100,000 amount. I know that's basically gone to the EDC, I guess, in the past, and it sounds like we're probably moving away from that. There's nothing concrete, but it seems like that's very possible. And I just, you know, we've talked about Pinnacles National Park. I agree we have to generate revenue, but I don't want to keep spending money and keep repeating the broken record, keep making the same mistake over and over and over again. $100,000 is a position, essentially. That could be a jail employee. So if that money is not actually producing any tangible benefits, then we have to really look elsewhere. And I could support it if there's a commitment to going to an outside professional marketing firm that would be helping us with tourism. And I mean a professional outside firm. I'm not talking about a new nonprofit or anything of those. We've already done this over and over and over again. And I want to stop making the same mistakes. And so I'm leery of that, but I'm optimistic if there's support from the board. I don't want to just put $100,000 into the budget and say we're going to do economic development. The EDC has not worked. There's an acknowledgement of that. But if there's a willingness to consider what I think there's a consensus at the cities and at the county, we've talked about it at intergovernmental, doing a branding campaign, really promoting Pinnacles so that we draw visitors here. To these other attractions that we have to generate revenue, I could support it if it's a professional outside marketing firm, but really nothing else. Thank you.
Supervisor Gonzalez?
Other than these memberships do serve a purpose, and as board members, we should be interacting with them as much as possible. The San Benito Business Council, I can't say much about the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership membership because I don't participate in that one, but I do partake in the chamber as well as the Business Council membership meetings, and so they are very informative. I mean, you're mingling with business people in the community. And there's a great forum for communication and exchange of ideas. I know that the CAO previously was very passionate about keeping the membership to the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. Could you explain what we are deriving from that membership? Because I know that you sit in those meetings, correct?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't?
Yeah, so I don't have any information.
I do.
That you were.
So I can give a little background while Dulce's coming up. Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, I mean, they did their presentation to us. The number one thing is they coordinate all of these, Uplift Central Coast, all of these other groups that are regional. And the big challenge we have is this is how the state's evaluating where revenue is going to be coming into local regions. And so by being a part of the economic the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership is we're looking at the tech hub and what technologies and what businesses can come here and what the state is going to fund to help bring business here to boost our economy. So to me, even though it's a $5,000 membership, the long-term effects of what we're going to get out of it, I think are worth it. But that's my opinion.
Correct. I just want to table or kind of expand on Uplift. They are representing San Benito County on a regional scope. So they do have more staffing and they're able to push our projects forward. I do know Ray sat on their board as well, and he did a presentation as State of the Union for San Benito County at one of the forums not too long ago. So he was more active in this one, and I hope that answers your question on kind of why we're involved and what they do for us. And continuing, they're sorry. They will advocate on the projects that would bring more jobs here. So also on housing, they do have their staff attend some of the housing elements. They provide input based on their professional opinion on what direction they should go on certain projects. And I think I covered most of it.
Yeah, but also broadband.
Oh, correct. They also... As far as broadband, I'm not too sure.
It's the Broadband for All initiative.
Yeah, so they are working on the broadband for all, but I don't have too much additional detail on that. But
thank you.
Okay, with that, any other comment? No? My biggest concern when it comes to not funding this is we don't have anybody in staff that does any of this. We don't have anybody that focuses on economic development and revenue, how it impacts our revenue generation. I am open-minded of looking at other options and other alternatives, but I really feel like if we don't keep this funding right now so that we can actually bring opportunities to our region or our county, that we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot of what the future could be. The $100,000, yeah, it's basically a placeholder. What that looks like, we've been spending it at the economic development partnership, which got us the SEDS. Well, we need to implement the SEDS. We need to have a plan for implementing the SEDS. And we need to fund, whether it's an outside or an in-house, or it's through a nonprofit or a collaborative of those three, where we work with nonprofits, we work with an outside, and we have maybe someone that's focusing on economic development in-house, where we can actually start to drive this forward. I do agree that I don't think it's worked well for us in the past. I don't think we've been strategic about a long-term plan. And what is our long-term plan? And when you say economic development, everybody thinks housing, and that's not where I'm going. I'm going revenue generation. What can we do to make our businesses more profitable? How do we invest in the businesses that are here right now and help boost them so that our tax base can go up? I love the idea of branding Pinnacles, but where are these people going to stay? We already know that they are in line out there in nowhere land with nowhere to spend their money. We've got HIP Camp, which are our new ordinance that's hopefully coming back to us, and that's going to hopefully get some TOT tax. But then we need to look at how do we make it easier to build hotels in our area? Why are we making hotels such a struggle, especially if there are ways of changing our general plan to be able to allow hotels to be more fast-tracked? Because if we get the money for the wine trail and we bring in the hotels, we're going to generate revenue and businesses and tax from our wineries, but also from the TOT, which then could also be a tourist tax that could fund a nonprofit or a position or whatever we're trying to do. So I'm really passionate about committing to moving forward and having a plan on how to generate revenue. And if we cut $100,000 from economic development, I think we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. And that's my 2 cents. Go ahead.
No, I just want to
Supervisor
clarify. I'm not suggesting cutting it. I just want to make sure that we're not just repeating the same mistakes over and over again.
I'm with you on
That's all
that.
I was saying. And I also think we should look at incentive programs. We have the sales tax reimbursement program. We've asked for that to come back. Hopefully that comes back soon so we can make modifications that are maybe necessary there. And if we can look at a hotel incentive program, I'd be all for listening to what we can do to incentivize more hotels, because of course we need more hotels.
Okay,
I just want to clarify.
Yeah, I apologize, but the way you had said it, I thought it was,
No,
we weren't going to even keep the 100,000.
I support it if there's a commitment, and maybe we can't, maybe there won't be that verbal commitments, our verbal commitments anyway, but I want that money to be used on we got to hire professional firms at some point and stop just relying on local partnerships and new nonprofits, and the economic EDC just didn't work. That's all.
Okay, I hear you. Okay, with that, I believe, unless there's any other comments. Okay, I think we're going to move on to roads. So that's item number 14 and 15, which is fund number 210. Welcome back, Ramon. Long time no see.
Thank you. So for the road crew, maintenance shop, it looks like we had salary. I'm sharing things that kind of popped out for me as I was reviewing some of these details over the weekend. So salaries and benefits, if we look at the third row, we had 2.2 million in the 23-24 CAO recommended budget, and in the 24-25 recommended budget, we have 2.6 million. That was approximately $400,000 increase. It's a 19% increase, and the reason for that, higher than normal, aside from the cost of living adjustments, is that the road fund staff decided to move an accountant staff from some other place. It was probably in the general fund, and they decided to put 100% of that person's time into the road crew. And so that caused a little bit of an increase. It used to be a 70% allocation to the road fund, 30% to general fund. And so now we're looking at 100% of the individual's cost to this road fund. But overall, the expenses increased 12%. That was $500,000. And that was a result of a lot of services and supplies. We had some computer maintenance increased by $26,000. Let's see, rent equipment increased by $25,000. Consultants increased by $15,000. We have a special department, other costs increased by $26,000. And then for CIP-related projects, we have a $191,000 item for the Public Works yard and sewer upgrade. And then we also have $21,000 Public Works yard security cameras. So a combination of those things is what resulted in the overall increase of $500,000 for this budget unit. This is a non-general fund budget, and the road fund has sufficient fund balance to cover all of these increases. And then the next item, also part of the road fund, is road bridge projects. In this budget unit, we had services and supplies increased by 19%. And I apologize. This is a incorrect note. They don't have salaries and benefits in this budget unit. This is for road and bridge projects, and the increases were mainly for road-related projects such as the lime kiln project, the hospital project, and a lot of these items we may need someone from RMA to go over any details if there are questions about it. I just copied some notes from the budgeting system. Union Road Bridge is a $20 million project increase. We have Pinoch, $872,000, Rocks, $150,000. Looks like Rosa Morada is in here for $1.6 million. Pinoch, I don't even understand that, $162,000. So a combination of road-related projects. It's fixed. It's one of the fixed asset accounts, but it's all road-related work. That's the difference between the 15.7 million in 23-24 to 28 million in the CAO recommended budget. And some of you are probably wondering why the department request was only $381,000 for fixed assets. It was zero in that middle column. We went from 15.7 million to zero and then back to 28 million. Part of that is because when RMA was working on some of these items, they had to start from scratch so that every project can be accounted for. And so the department requested process, it zeroed out everything automatically. And then in the CAO recommended budget, it wasn't that I entered the information. In this case, the RMA staff, the fiscal officer entered all items related to road projects, bridge projects. So that's why it's showing that significant increase. And again, the reason the CAO, the administrative office is okay with this recommended budget is because there is sufficient fund balance in the road fund.
Okay. With that, let's open it up to public comment.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card. On Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
Okay, with no public comment, I'm going to bring it back. Supervisor
Yeah, I'll just
Cosmici?
real quick, I'm proud of this county that we're finally starting to address the roads. This is it's a large dollar amount proportionally to the budget, but we got a long way to go. And I just want to point out, these are one-time monies. This isn't ongoing revenues. It's not like we're using this for staffing. So just want to say that, just very proud of us that we're moving forward finally and just getting started. Thanks.
Supervisor Sotelo.
Ramon, I've got a question for you on under revenues, transfer in. What exactly, and like on the sheriff's, there was a transfer out, that 411,000.
Mm-hmm.
What is the transfer in and the transfer out?
So the transfer in account is used to show that a fund, in this case, the road fund, is anticipating the need for $3.4 million transfer into the road fund from other funds. And in some cases, it could be that RMA is planning to transfer in money from the enterprise fund, or this transfer in will also include a general fund contribution of about, I have it broken out in segments. And okay, so the general fund contribution for road-related projects is $14.8 million. That doesn't mean it's all going to this specific project or budget unit. In this case, we're looking at Division 2020 road bridge projects. So that probably, of the 3.4 million, about 800,000 would be a general fund contribution. So that would be the transfer in. It's the RMA team showing that for the road fund, we will be receiving some of that from enterprise fund and then from the general fund to make up the difference. The other revenues of 24.9 million would be from different state monies and federal monies. That's the bulk of the revenue for the road fund. And then the transfer out, to follow up with that, would be, in this case, we don't have a transfer out, but if we did have a budget unit showing a transfer out, a lot of times the transfer out account is used, if it's a regular budget unit, such as, like if it's a general fund department, the transfer out would be for the $400,000 that you mentioned, it should be $25,000. I reviewed the details. It was not $411,000. But that transfer out account is being used for capital projects. So if a general fund department, in this case the sheriff's department, if they know they have requested a capital project, then the direction from RMA and the administrative office is for departments to account for that capital project in their budget unit using the transfer out account. Because the way capital projects work is that all of the projects are tracked in the capital project fund, which is separate. However, that fund relies on funding sources that are not the capital project fund. So the funding sources are either state money, federal money, or general fund contributions. And so that $411 amount, if it was correct, it really, again, it should be $25,000. That $25,000 transfer out represents the general fund contribution for a specific project in the sheriff's department. I believe it was evidence lockers. That's what it was. Not for 11, but 25,000 was for evidence lockers.
And so with, like this 800,000 that you just talked about coming from the general fund for the roads, is that something that we potentially could look at for some of the shortfall that we're having to make up for the deficit?
Potentially. I'd have to review with the RMA team to see if the $800,000 can be reduced. I know for a fact $179,000 we cannot touch because it's specifically the county's maintenance of effort contribution for, it's an SB1 requirement.
Okay.
So roughly $180,000 we wouldn't be able to touch. However, the remaining $600,000, I have it in my notes as a road bridge contribution. So maybe the $600,000 amount.
We've got to look at everything. So thank you.
Supervisor Gonzalez, anything? Supervisor Zanger? No? Okay, so you kind of hit a little bit of where I start to have some questions, because you actually went right where I was going to ask my question, so I appreciate the clarification. The transfer in, transfer out, and this may be an auditor question. I'm not sure if this is part of the ACFR, which used to be the CAFR. But do we have a location that shows all of these restricted funds balance where the account, where like the enterprise fund, and that's getting funded by other sources, and it's a fund that we have that we pull into the budget. There are many items that we pull into the budget from other funds. Do we have a summary of all of these besides maybe the ACFR is very detailed, but is there a place that shows where all of these funds and the fund balances are that feed the transfer in and the transfer out? Because it's an area that I keep having a lot of questions.
If you wanted to see the details of like enterprise funds or
I don't want to see the details of a specific fund. I want to see all of the funds outside of that fund the budget, that are not just general fund. And I know it's the ACFR is pretty much where it's at, but where those are and what the earmarks are. So for example, I'm going to dumb it down really simple to something that I understand because of where I used to work. I had a modernization fund. I had a micrographics fund. I had a security fund. I had, I can't keep going because I can't remember them all. And I'm looking for Francisco because he would remember them, but Joe probably does. These are funds that I, with my fees, was putting money into. I only put so much money into my budget from those funds. Those funds have balances. Where do I get a list of that? I knew Joe Paul would come up. And it may be that I'm just not really good at reading the ACFR. It's very complicated. But do you know where I'm going, Joe Paul?
No, I do.
Okay. I'm glad you do.
So, but this is budget, completely different than the ACFR, we report in the ACFR. For budgeting, we have in the ACFR a transfers in, transfers out, report.
And it's a snapshot at one point in time, is that correct?
On June 30th.
Yeah.
that report basically nets to zero because things come in, things come out. And so it ends up, being a zero balance. So as it relates to your question in budget, however, those funds that are in these special revenue funds, like modernization, you recall modernization, and the other one was
Security, micrographics. I mean, these are just other funds. These are only the ones I know of.
those exist in fund balance, in the general fund balance. They're not off the books. They're in there. So they're already included as a source of funding.
But as restricted?
Potentially for this budget.
Okay.
They're there. And so, like, for example, in the recorder's budget, there may be some use of that as a source of revenue for a specific project that he may have. The sheriff's office has several of those special revenue funds that is also available for those specific, needs that he may have in that department. So, but they're accounted for as part of fund balance.
They are part of fund balance. Okay, that answered my question to understand, because I know so much is transferred in the roads and bridges, and I mean, it's more complicated in public works probably than
A lot
anywhere
of
else.
the public works stuff is it's a transfer in is really general fund transfer in.
Okay.
Or it could be from one of the COG funds, depending upon the project. So, but
what's
as it relates to the general fund, our fund balance, our special revenue funds are counted in fund balance. And they're already part of this budget has already been that part that administration wishes to use to balance this year's budget. They've already included it.
They've included it. I want, maybe a separate conversation for another time is I want to go outside of that and see what are all those to better understand where they're coming from. So I know administration pulls from those. I want to kind of understand that list of them and what the balances are. And that's more of the ACFR, isn't it? Because it's,
Well, it's that would really be part of our, part of our general ledger.
Okay.
That we'd be able to show you specifically those special revenue funds.
Because what I'm looking at is not just budgeting for today, looking at where those are, what those balances are, and how are they being funded? Is it a fee method? Do we need to be looking at our fees? Is it a legislative method? Is it, just to kind of better understand where those are getting funded so that, and this goes along with the impact fees from planning and new development, and making sure. So I'm always happy that we're looking at those. But we don't want to also discourage a future business from coming here because our impact fees are so high. So there's a balancing act. I'm just trying to wrap my head around. Still very new, all of this. But thank you, Joe Paul. I appreciate it. Okay, with that, I think, unless there's more questions on this one, I think that brings us to, make sure I'm right here. We're going to go to capital projects, and that's Fund 300, item number 16.
For capital projects, I'd like to call up Steve Loops to walk us through that budget unit. Yeah, right in. It's over here. It's right there. Okay, thanks.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon, Steve.
Steve Luke, Public Works Administrator. So, as Ramon mentioned, he and I and our finance crew have been working on dialing into capital projects. And so we're going to take a few moments to have the board provide input on where we're at and what we have available. So this is essentially the same item that you see on the board with item number 6 has been revised by the amount of $4,000, which I'll talk about in a moment. But otherwise, I'm going to go through these colors in a moment, but these are for the board's consideration of what we should fund for capital projects and what we should not fund. And so Ramon has found a way for the general fund, and these are to be discussed, to be used by the general fund. Ramon has found a way to set aside $1 million plus or minus for capital projects for your consideration. And what I'll do first is talk about the yellow items. And so what we've actually done on this list of 25 items, we've ranked them in priority from health, safety, ongoing projects, and then capital projects, kind of a general wish list, I'll say, or ones that can be postponed. And that's in order from 1 down to 25. And so working with the sheriff, and they have a trust fund that they're able to use on couple of these projects, and working with the road fund and public works and some of those funds, we've been able to essentially shift out about $600,000 of capital projects that won't be needed to utilize the general fund. That's what's shown in yellow. So I'll go through those real quick. And Ramon can correct me because we've been going back and forth for the past week or so on these. So for the jail, the old jail, I should say, there's a mold abatement that we want to perform for $211,000, item 1. It's coming out of the Sheriff's Trust Fund. The old jail also has a transfer switch replacement that's needed for the power that gets switched on and off, essentially. And we just put a project fund, but I think it's also one of the sheriff's funds at $55,000 trust fund. It's also the sheriff trust fund. Okay. So we confirm that. That's great. Then skipping down to items 4 and 5, county roof project, public works yard, public works security system. That's going to come from the road fund that we mentioned just a few moments ago. That's also in yellow. And then jumping down to item 9, there's flooring and a lot of repairs that we need at the old jail for the showers and some restroom areas, and some ADA upgrades and things, and that's also coming from the sheriff fund. So those have been extracted from needing to use the general fund. So now we'll switch back over to the million plus or minus that Ramon has allocated or found for general fund use, and that's going to be shown in the light green. So I'll just go through those and we can talk about them, and I'll probably pause there. And actually the list now is closer to 800K, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So item 3, Sheriff's Department alternate dispatch site, that's the 9/11 operations that we have at OES. We're transferring that to the Sheriff's Department down on Technology Parkway. And for next fiscal year, the general fund is going to need, it'll need to be funded by the general fund, proposed to be funded by the general fund to the tune of $39,000. We've already started that project. We're about 2/3 through. Then you jump to item 6, old jail, economizer repair. It was going to be $12,000. It's now $16,000. And that's the unit that monitors airflow at the jail for an area of the jail. The jail has a really has an older HVAC type system, and so that economizer unit needs to be replaced in order to keep the air flowing and to bring in cool air when it makes sense and to blow out hot air when it makes sense. So that's what the economizer repair is for item 6. There's a grinder that when sewage is transmitted through the jail, this is item 7, It goes into some sewer pipes. It goes in this big vault before it gets out to this regional wastewater treatment plant. Well, the tenants of the jail tend to throw a lot of things into their sewage toilets and things, and those things go through this grinder before they go out into the general sewer system. And so our current grinder needs to be replaced to the tune of $90,000 being proposed for the general fund. That's item number 7. Item number 8, actually, I take about 8, is a 1.9 million fund. It's not highlighted as under the blue column under the 4 million because it's just a 1.9 million Hall of Records fund that's being set aside in the general fund. So it's not being taken out of the general fund. Library book locker, 17,000 out of the general fund. It's an ongoing project. It's getting completed. That's why it's there. Old jail handler, air handler replacement system, essentially one of the units up on the roof to the tune of 180,000. It needs to be replaced. There's kind of either 5 or 6 main units. I think there's 5, and one of them needs to be replaced. So that's the 180,000 for item 11. Ag department for the 275 on item 12. That's essentially when the county says we have an ag department, we are telling the state we want to have an ag department and we contribute funding. And then when we do that, the state essentially matches that fund. So it's kind of a dollar for dollar. And pretty much from what I've been told, all ag departments or all counties that have ag departments, they contribute those funds. And we, on an average, when we do that, the state would match us about $280,000 a year on average. And so that's how we came up with that amount of, if the county contributes 275, then the state will also match 275 after the fact. So that's 13. Item 14, evidence lockers, 25,000. That's the item that Ramon mentioned previously to be provided by the general fund. One little bollard at the parking lot. That's item 16. And then down below, San Felipe Building interior improvements, 1131. So when we had to transfer staff over to 1131 San Felipe, essentially the assessors and tax collectors, to make their area functional and usable by the public, essentially, and have some security implemented, we need $70,000 from the general fund. They're also providing their own service budgets and things from other funds on an older project it's ongoing, but we set aside $70,000 for that project. And so when you add those up, because we removed a few before, it's to the tune of about 800,000. So it's actually, if you had $1 million, I think right now we're at about $200,000 savings, roughly. So I'm going to pause there. We can go into the non-recommended items in blue, if you want, or I can just pause there for the board. So.
Because I know we're going to have multiple questions and we're going to have to open this up to public comments, why don't you just keep going?
Okay, fair enough. So a couple things that were not within that $1 million set aside. One was a DA subfloor repair and carpet replacement in the district attorney's office for their flooring that needs replacement, but perhaps not right away. Another item was bigger, just to design a roof replacement for the old jail. Which needs sooner or later. Just the design was going to be $200,000. That's item 17. 18, right now at the RMA Planning Department, our team, they're kind of just separated by cubicles, a good portion of them downstairs. And so when they have video conference calls, it gets a little confusing. But so we requested some partition walls. They wouldn't go all the way to the top, but they'd at least block the sound for, a dozen of our staff and the building department and planning and an engineer as well. But it's not urgent. It would be nice. County roof projects, the actual roof portions over at the admin building here, some roof repairs to the tune of $270,000. Sheriff, RMA on item 20. We share a building with them, so some roof repairs would be $260,000. That's just to repair portions. Sheriff Training Center roof area, item 21 is $57,000. Old jail roof perimeter water catchment system. So essentially water runs off the roof at the jail, the old jail, and it kind of pools in certain areas around the foundation. We be nice to repair that, but we didn't think it was a priority to the tune of $150,000. Number 23, the Ag Commissioner's Garage remodel, $150,000, and the Office of Education interior improvements, $150,000. That's the one where if the Office of Education ends up relocating to 1131, where the assessors, tax collectors are today, the county is responsible for that remodel and move. And so that would be $150,000, but I don't think, even if that project moves forward, it probably will not even happen this fiscal year. It would not happen until next summer. So that's the end of the list. I'll pause there.
Okay, is that it for the whole thing or just?
Oh, we can go. I'm sorry. So
The
that
only
was,
reason I'm saying is because we're going to have to open it up to public comment.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to just keep going if everybody's good with asking their questions all at once. Okay.
Can I just ask for clarification? I don't have the same spreadsheet that you have. I have one that looks similar, but it's not the color-coded one. So you said those that aren't essential is item number 15. Was that 19?
Can we pull it back up on the screen?
yeah, I'm not sure where it disappeared. Okay, so I can list for you, Supervisor
Yeah, if you want
Gonzalez.
to
You bet.
go ahead, just the numbers. I don't need the description, just the
You
numbers.
bet. The non-essential was 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. So 17 through 24.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You bet. All right, so now these are all general fund discussion items for projects. Now we'll go into projects that are already funded through different sources. Tiny homes, phase 1, 2. Those really, the only reason those are highlighted in gold is because the general fund's not going to need more money. It's just we're doing transfers of budgets, but it's all funded with inclusionary housing funds. So I just had to increase it to be what it is, to be more current, I guess you'd say. So I don't know where, I can just go through these real quick, but these all have their own funding sources. So besides that, we have a library kiosk, old jail sewer vent replacement, Chappelle Road remodel, RMA admin document control. I mean, do you want me to read through these or just, what would you like me to do, Chair?
No, is there anything that you want to highlight that's different from what we've seen before? Because a lot of these we've seen before.
You have seen them before,
Yeah.
exactly. The only one I would highlight is 41. It's the library expansion remodel, just because we're determining through ARPA and things where our match is generated from. And previously it was 2.5 million ARPA, but I think that's probably going to be not the case when we talk about ARPA later for the library matching fund, correct? So the library matching funds ARPA would be used for other things, and then the ARPA funds would be transferred out and held in an account, essentially. So otherwise, yeah, we've seen them all. Okay, so let's go moving on. New non-general funds. One thing to note, I think you've already seen this actually, but the chamber seats remodel, security, audio video upgrades. We have a LATCF fund, so it's not general fund, but it's to upgrade this area and provide some security measures that we think are important, but again, it's non-general fund. And then we have parks, non-general funds. A lot of park projects have even been completed, and I think that's it. So, yeah.
Okay, well, let's open it up to public comment and then we'll bring it back to the board for discussion.
All righty.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card on Zoom. Please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
And I'm just going to make one comment. Our slides are very different than your slides because there were a few slides there at the end. So if we could get those emailed out to all of the board members.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Supervisor Zanger?
Yep. Yeah, so I have some comments on the general fund projects. I don't really have any comments on the non-general fund projects. So on the general fund, just in light of the budget, the way it's playing out this year, obviously I want to forego all the non-essential at this time. However many that was, 7 of them or whatever it was. And I had a question. You mentioned the jail sewer grinder problem. So if we replace the grinder, aren't the jail residents going to just destroy the new one as well?
Yes, they will. It'll take about 3 years, roughly.
So it's just that every 3 years we have to replace it because and there's no way to prevent them from destroying it?
We've had discussions. Those questions are ongoing discussions we've had with the jail staff. And for context, every jail we reached out to, they have the exact same issue with their tenants. And some of them have actually dual grinders, and so they just switch over to the other one while they replace the other grinder. But how should I say this? Tenants of the jail are very resourceful, and so when you try to limit ways for them to dispose of materials, then they create other products out of the debris that they're retaining. So long story short, it's probably going to be a continuing problem. We're just going to have to replace the grinder every few years. So, yeah.
Okay. That's fine. That's just depressing. That's fine.
Understood.
Let's see. I had some other question. Oh, yeah. Can you just explain the book locker? I know it's an ongoing thing, but can you explain that in some more depth?
What if Manny wants it's so I think it's a system where you can check in, check out books. It's an ongoing project. Some of it was funded, and we're just trying to finish up the project. Essentially, it was, we actually have some funding that was given to us, and then we're just trying to finish it up with the funds that are needed. But I think it's a way to electronically check in and check out lock books when, like, libraries closed, essentially. So.
Okay, and then the San Felipe building interior improvement, you said that's necessary for them to be working there, but they're working there now, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's for some security upgrades and a couple other things.
Would it be essential if they're working there now, though?
Essential, it's part of its security cameras, and I don't know if Melinda or Tom would like to chime in, and they could probably do a better job of explaining their need for that. But Public Works thinks it's needed, so I don't know if Melinda or Tom, if you want to.
So we kind of have a phase 1 and a phase 2 for the San Felipe project. We're currently working on phase 1, which is the remodel of the lobby area. During our first and second installments for property taxes, we only had one window. And so we had people reaching underneath the glass and people going over the glass. And so this was not very effective for us at all. And then we had a very strange looking reception desk. It was kind of a V and it was made of wood. And we wanted to just straighten that out so we could put more people on that area, that counter for tax collection, and move our reception over to the one window. And then when they destroyed the wooden structure, they found out that it was like embedded in the concrete. So anyways, we're almost finished with that project. So when taxpayers come in, they'll be able to come to a counter and they'll have a couple, 2 to 3 personnel working at the counter for them. And then we'll have just the one window for the Treasury office. We needed security cameras because we have a lot of he say, she say, I paid. No, you didn't. We don't have records. So the security cameras were really important, and we deal with a lot of checks, and we have cash that comes in also. The phase 2 was behind the doors where we needed some upgrades to our bathrooms. They were built, I don't know, what, in the 80s, 70s, or some, however long that building's been there. How do I put this delicately? They're child size facilities. They have drainage issues. So we need some upgrades, especially in the bathrooms, and the kitchen's kind of like that too. So these were are we working there? We're working there, but it's a lot of frustration to deal with some of those issues. So that's phase 2 that we're looking to do in the next fiscal year.
Okay.
So, Tom has the other questions.
Anything else, Tom?
No, thank you.
Supervisor Sotelo?
Hey, Melinda, before you go away, is CSDC helping at all? Like if you're having drainage issues or anything like that, since they're the owner of the building, are they helping take care of any of those issues for you guys?
So some of the issues that we've had, CSDC, the landlord, is helping us with those. I'm thinking that some of them, he doesn't feel they're really responsible for the toilets that are there, have been there, they work. They're just child size.
Yeah, if there was drainage issues, that's different than wanting a different size toilet, but just curious.
Yeah.
And then do you know, are any of the repairs or the upgrades that are being done right now, will that, let's say the Office of Education moves out there in time, are we lessening some of the repairs that need to be done when they move out there? Potentially, like we've got a line item here for $150,000 for Office of Education interior improvements that essentially is going to be the same location where you guys are currently. And so just wondering if, we're spending some of it up front to help the public and help our employees right now do their job and be more efficient, but will that reduce the expenses later on because some of the work is being done now? And I don't know, maybe that's a Steve question.
I would think so. I don't know who would have wanted that lobby. So I would think that that's a major improvement to them. Plus, it's with the lobby has the security cameras. So I would think so. I don't know really what else they would want to be remodeled, unless they were, I don't know, had something to do with moving walls or something like that. And I think that's probably up to the landlord.
Steve, do you know? Are we saving any costs later on by doing some of this work now, or will we still have this $150,000 line item?
It's probably the restroom upgrades, just so they're functional for adults. But so one of the things Office of Ed wants to do is the kitchen's kind of long and narrow, and they wanted to take out a portion of the wall and connect a conference room to it. That was an Office of Ed request, and some aesthetic things. So except for the restroom upgrades, that's pretty much the only overlap. Like Melinda said, it'll be like, I'm sure they'll benefit from the front counter, but the front counter, the new countertops, that was more for tax collector, assessor type of needs. So, yeah. And then one thing Melinda explained a little bit, and I did, this used to be one large overall project with the security cameras, the bathrooms, the countertops, Without boring you with all the ridiculous details, we broke it into 2 projects. But originally, it was all one, but they're 2 separate, I'll just leave it this, they're 2 separate projects. And so, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've got a couple more questions. So I know that we're kind of saying, okay, we could put the roofing repairs kind of on the back burner, but do you feel, are we okay deferring that for potentially another year, or are we at risk of having some, real extensive damage if we had big rains or something like that? We defer it and then we end up costing triple the amount had we just done it now.
Great question. Since I'll just speak from my office. It's had a leak since I've been there for 3 years, but it hasn't gotten worse. We're going to have, one of the things on our to-do list is to have an assessment. I think the answer to your question is we need to do a new assessment of the roofs and really see where we're at. And that's part of the reason we decided not to throw another $1 million at the roof repairs. There was an overall master facilities plan done several years ago. It mentioned roofs and roof repairs, but our current team, we haven't had a chance to assess that. So we're going to work with a consultant on a consultant budget and a different budget source to just look at the roofs for admin, for Sheriff's RMA, and see what's needed. So that was the other reason for the deferral. So I think the answer to your question is we thought it was better to just not prioritize those for this year. So.
Okay, thank you. And then the last one I had was regarding the Ag Commissioner. So item 12 is Ag Department building improvement for $275,000 that then basically the state matches.
Correct.
Is that for operations or is that for actual improvements to the building?
My understanding is we can use that for improvements, i.e. we're going to be setting aside a fund. The ag buildings have several needs, and so we have a list, and so that 275 is going to go towards that list of improvements for the building, not operations, to answer your question.
But it wouldn't include the $68,000 for the garage?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, but we are doing
two separate things. Yeah.
But we are looking at doing improvements to the actual structure out there.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Supervisor Kosmicki.
Yeah, thank you. My understanding with the Office of Ed part is that, kind of all signs are pointing to potentially likely staying at the old courthouse as far as the current location, with the old courthouse being used for hopefully the new library. That's kind of where things are going, at least in my head, I guess. And it doesn't seem like there's urgency either way on that to spend that money, obviously. We also have, if there is a major issue, and not that we want to count on the $2 million contingency, but we do have that in our back pocket. And I understand we used 1.6 this last year, so it's not, things do come up. And I think Ramon let me know, I think we used it on the Pacheco issue that we had. But we do have that if we have some roof failure. And then you mentioned the $200,000 shift or available. Does that mean we have $200,000 left cushion toward the assistant CAO shortfall?
Yeah, so when you add up the green items that we're proposing to be used for general funds, which is 3, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 16, and number 25, we still have that only equals up to about $800,000. So we stayed under the Ramon's $1 million cap, I'll say. And so, yes, the answer is yes. There's about $200,000 remaining in the general fund CIP set aside that Ramon has set aside for, kind of like $1 million max. There's $200,000 remaining to be used for other.
Okay, just for clarity, as one option when we look at how we're going to shift to balance the budget. And then I was wondering about there's obviously this community corrections partnership, and they make the recommendations on funding. And I think there was a $40,000 playground. We've used it for public defender. Now I'm just wondering how that balance plays out with CCP versus general fund versus other sources, because we obviously have a lot of needs at the jail and elsewhere in law enforcement.
Yeah, so specifically, like, for example, the playgrounds, I believe it's on the list. It's just they found their own fund for that. Does that answer your question?
I think it was under CCP. That's all. Yeah. I'm just wondering how that, I know they give us recommendations basically, there's strong recommendations. We essentially take them and run with them. But I'm just wondering how that balance plays out. And I'm not again, I think the priority list, I think I have the same maybe approach as Supervisor Zanger, that, this is an extra tight year, so the $1 million, and if we can cut that back a little bit, and if we need to use that $200,000, I think we should strongly consider that. But I'm just curious how that balance, is it just a juggling game basically, like you're trying to find funding sources from year to year on these capital projects that are needed?
Correct. Yeah. So I don't think it's an official request, but for example, CCP might say, okay, your jail restrooms need some attention, I'll say. And so when we walked with staff and talked to the sheriff's department, they said, yes, please allocate some funding for the jail showers. Fortunately, the sheriff's also found a trust fund to use for that amount. So maybe what you're getting at is, 2/3 of these items are for the old jail, which is, that group would support those items, I guess you'd say?
If there's a need to find funding, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there as, I'm not on the CCP, I haven't been on there, but just if we need to go to them and ask if there's available funding for some of these projects, maybe that's a consideration. Just as these creative options that we're trying to come up with. And then I agree, if we have to look at, so we have the 200, if we have to look at the 70, if we have to look at areas, I would say the 70, if we could put off, on that one, that would be one to essentially look at if we're trying to balance the budget. And that's all. Thanks.
Supervisor Gonzalez? Nothing? Okay, Steve. Always love talking about facilities because it's an endless game and it's an endless cycle of repairs. So a couple of my questions actually were already asked by other supervisors, so I appreciate that. When I heard $1 million, but we've got 800,000 and there's 200, I did the same math. I'm like, oh, that's money. So, okay, you guys already know that. Don't have to tell you. But I did notice that you have a jail impact fees on some of the capital improvement projects from the second slide that are not from general fund. So what other, because that's where I was going, is there's a lot of repairs that we need for the jail. Are there other funding sources available for jail repairs? I don't know if there's trust accounts but I just saw that jail impact fee. Are we utilizing all of the impact fees to the best of our ability so that we aren't putting it on the general fund?
Yeah, so for a lot of our projects, we've been corresponding a lot better, especially this last year with Kelly Kennedy and the sheriff's staff. And Ramon has been reaching out to them. So I think we've tapped into those sources as much as we can, to answer your question, because a few times we said, can we perform this repair using this impact fund or this trust fund? Right. And the answer was no. Now as you saw, like you just mentioned, probably half a dozen, the answer was yes. So I think we're having that
balancing
coordination and we're making those requests. And
just the obvious questions, sorry, wanting to make sure that we're using them the best we can. So one of the things that I always am challenged with budgeting for capital improvement projects is what can you get done this year? Really, realistically, not what needs to be done, but what can you get done? Because sometimes what needs to get done outweighs what you can get done. So in looking at what the number, I think it was 15 and then 17 through 25, I'm assuming those are ones that you've set aside because you can't get them done. But which projects that are not being set aside have you already started that are in progress? Because one of the challenges you have with us up here is that we make a decision and then all of a sudden the brakes are put on a project. So what projects are in progress, because those should take priority over projects that are not started unless they're urgency projects. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, great question.
I'm assuming you're using this logic.
Yeah, great question. I mean, real quick, I won't go through the actual project, but 3, 4, 5, 10, and 11, the reason why they're recommended to be used for general funds is because they are ongoing projects, and we do think they'll get completed. Pretty much all the ones we're recommending for general fund will get completed this year, with the caveat or with the one exception. I think we're trying to build a fund for the ag department building improvements. So maybe we spend the $275 this year, or maybe that overlaps into the next year, because if we say, okay, ag roof is actually $350, then we get, have $275. So I'm not sure, but we need to accumulate that fund. The rest of them, yeah, they should be able to be completed. And like I said, there's already half a dozen that we're just trying to finish up, and that's why they made this list. So.
Gotcha. And I appreciate the questions from Supervisor Sotelo also, because that building, that CSDC building is owned by somebody, and if they have a wastewater problem, that shouldn't fall on the leasers. Just we shouldn't have to pay for that. And then the 150, but the 150 isn't even in this budget for the Office of Ed, which is a conversation for a future date. So those were all my questions. I really appreciate all the hard work you guys have put into this, but anything that we can squeeze out of here to help fund the ask for the Assistant CAO is much appreciated.
Sounds good. Yeah, we tried to save 200,000 for you, so we tried, but thank you.
Keep it up, Steve.
All right.
Okay, yes.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Sorry.
Appreciate it.
I just wanted to hijack this conversation real quick. So one of the things that Steve alluded to was that we're looking at impact fees. And I would appreciate it, and I don't know if this is something that come direction from the board or just a request, but if council can, and David and I have talked about this, and Margaret, I do think being so resource needy as we are, that we should consider, David, cover your ears for a second, working in some gray areas at times. There's some, and Kelly, don't quit, but there's jail impact fees, there's public safety impact fees that, like Steve said, we brought projects forward in the past and we've been told no. And I honestly think they qualify. One of the things that I think honestly qualifies, this is off topic, we could talk about this or council can look into it, the Axon project that we did, it's an expansion of technology. And any expansion of services should fall in the purview of impact fees, and we were told no. So now that's a general fund burden when we have this impact fee balance that we could be using. So I would appreciate it as the sheriff if we could really take a deep look at, because Kelly has with her an opinion from years ago from a county council about there was a mindset in this county of impact fees are only used to build big things, build big expensive things. And for us, the opinion that we have had to do specifically with police cars, with patrol cars. So yes, when you build it, this is my very brief understanding of it, and I could be wrong. You build a building, you expect it to last about 100 years, whatever, right? So you can't use impact fees to build a building and then start remodeling it. You can only expand it. When you buy a vehicle, the lifespan's about 5 years. So if you use impact fees to buy a car and the car is gone at 5 years, you can use impact fees again for that car. That's the legal opinion we have, and that has not been what we've been allowed to do here. And it just frustrates me that there's this money sitting in this account, and we're asking so much of this community to fund things, and there's just this balance is sitting out there. So that was a lot more than I expected to say, but that's kind of what I would hope that we could look at is really how can we use these impact fees balances we have. We're charging the developers for them. Let's use them.
I really appreciate that comment because that's where I was going with these other trust accounts that can be utilized, that some people say no when in actuality there can be a yes. So I really appreciate that. And if we can definitely dive into all of those types of funds, I think that there's some untapped or resources that when we're approving things in budgets that it looks like we have no choice but to take it out of the general fund, but there really is an impact fee or there is a funding source that we could utilize. So I appreciate that. Supervisor Zanger.
Yeah, question on that. Who's making the calls on what is and isn't qualifying for impact fees?
In my experience historically?
Like, yeah, who said Axon wasn't going to work?
That was specifically the CAO's office that said no.
Okay, so it's just but it's a legal question, I guess, right? Is whether or not something is.
And my former counsel, who's not here anymore, opined that it was allowable, but it wasn't budgeted that way.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, we could get a new legal opinion on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
That's all. Thank you.
Cool.
And I think we should be looking at that, across the board where there's funds that are out there that accumulate funds. And if departments are having asks in their departments, they need to be using those funds in every way possible before coming to the general fund. That was why I wanted that list from Joe Paul of all those outside funds so I could start educating myself more.
I would like to tell the sheriff, though, that all lawyers do is work in the gray area. So,
Thank you, David. Okay, so Ramon, we did open this up to public comment, or did I miss that? I did? Okay, making sure I have to check my boxes here. Anything to add? Because now we're under staff recommendations and deliberation right now.
Can I ask a quick question?
Go right ahead, Supervisors.
So because we're not approving anything today, and this is our last meeting until July,
Not now.
We were actually
So
going to
do we
continue
need
this
to-
tomorrow.
so that's what-
Yeah,
Oh, we're gonna
tomorrow
continue tomorrow?
After the board meeting. We were going to continue. Ramon, am I wrong? Am I misspeaking?
That doesn't give staff very much time to try to work this out.
Don't worry. He was going to come back with some stuff tomorrow, and if we needed to, we could do it on the July 16th meeting.
Or I was looking, there's one more week in June. We could meet next Tuesday. And I feel like that's a whole week for staff to kind of work through all of this and bring us something a little more solid than work until midnight tonight and bring us
Well,
something.
no, I
tomorrow.
wasn't asking that. In talking with Ramon, he goes, I could have something back to you tomorrow to give you guys something at the end of the day so you can see where I'm going. I think that's where.
But I would echo what Supervisors, just to give them extra time so they're not feeling the heat. If we have the time, we got 2 weeks, I would suggest just, even if it's a quick meeting next Tuesday, to do that. That would be my.
Okay.
I would agree, yes.
I don't have a problem with that at all. If you guys are all in agreement, okay? So that gives you till next week, so you don't have to rush. Yes. How many days do we have to give for notice?
David, do you know the answer?
For a public hearing, how many days do we have to give for a public hearing?
Oh, so can we do it by the end of the week, though? Could we do like a Friday meeting?
Continue this public hearing.
Could we continue to a date certain?
Yeah, date certain, next Tuesday. Continue to next Tuesday.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, okay.
We're continuing to next Tuesday.
Could we have that as a motion with the adjournment?
Okay, can I get a motion to continue the public hearing to next Tuesday?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that's 5-0. So we're continuing the hearing to next Tuesday. Ramon, thank you for everything that you've done, and staff. Amazing job. I know it's a lot of work. Any ending comments?
No, I just thank for everybody's time, and we'll start putting it all together so we have some more discussions coming.
It's really great. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I got a first from Gonzalez, second from Kosmicki. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Oh, so we're not
adjourning.
We're not adjourning. Okay,
we're-
never mind.
we're
Cancel that
postponing it.
adjournment.
We're postponing it to
We're
a
post- okay,
date.
I got a
and time
motion to
certain.
continue, and I don't have to adjourn. Thank
Yes.
you.
Can we look?
You guys keep me on my
Madam
toes.
Chair, can we
Yes.
look into, just to make sure on the legal side, whether you have to do it within I thought you had to do it within a certain time frame.
I think it's
Just to
like 10 days.
double check on that. On the continuance,
Yeah.
just the continuance of a public hearing. I think you have to do it within a certain time frame. Yeah, and just so we can just make sure we double check that, just
Yep.
extra clarification.
So we're double checking the continuance
think
is
we've done
okay for a week
Yeah, I think we've done it in
that
the
we're
past,
within-
like that we had to do it by like Friday or
by Friday. Okay. If for some reason it has to come back to us sooner, just shoot us all an email and we'll make it happen. So if,
I think the posting requirement is what it was that made it.
Oh, okay. I'm
Correct.
just
The
wanting to keep
posting,
us in-
if we wanted to use the same agenda, it would have to be within 5 days. So if it's next Tuesday, we would just
We're gonna repost.
another agenda. Yeah.
okay, great. Thank you for the clarification.
I got it.
With that, continue next week. We'll see everybody tomorrow for the board meeting. Have a great day.